Hello, welcome back to another evening of shared stories and adventures. Tonight we're diving into Stranger Things theories. I'll be covering speculation and possibilities I can fit in tonight, but there's definitely more to come. So we'll start with the Upside Down's origins and Vecna's plan. Then we'll move on to Will's destiny, Max's fate, and theories about time loops and D&D mythology. Plenty to get talking about, but if you like what I do and want to support the channel, consider subscribing below. But for now, grab your favourite blanket, get cozy on the couch, and let's begin. So way before Vecna became the spider monster villain of Season 4, way before the Demogorgon snatched Will Byers, and even before 11 opened that first gate at Hawkins' lab, there was something else. A place, a dimension. And honestly, after all these seasons, we're still trying to figure out what the hell it actually is. The Upside Down is one of those things that sounds simple on the surface but gets more complicated the deeper you dig. Most people assume it's just this evil mirror dimension that's always existed alongside Hawkins, Indiana. But Season 4 threw a massive wrench in that theory, and Season 5 is starting to pull back even more layers. Let's start with the basics, though. The Upside Down, as we know it, is this decaying alternate version of Hawkins. It's dark, it's covered in vines and spores, the air is toxic, and everything looks like it's rotting. There's no sun, just this perpetual gloom with red lightning crackling through the sky. It's proper unsettling. But here's where it gets interesting. In Season 4, when Nancy Wheeler goes into the Upside Down, she notices something weird. The Upside Down version of her bedroom is frozen in time. Not current Nancy's room, but her room exactly as it looked on November 6th, 1983, the day Will Byers vanished. That's not a coincidence. Before looking into all this, I honestly hadn't realised just how significant that date is to the entire mythology of the show. November 6th, 1983 wasn't just the day Will disappeared. It was the day the Upside Down, as we understand it, was created. Or rather, it was the day this mirror dimension locked onto Hawkins and stopped progressing. So what was it before that? This is where Dimension X comes in. According to the show's lore and some really helpful context from interviews with the Duffer Brothers, Dimension X and the Upside Down aren't the same thing. They're related, sure, but they're distinct. Dimension X is this primordial wasteland that existed long before Hawkins was even a thought. It's barren, desolate, filled with floating rocks and dramatic mountainous terrain. There are no buildings, no signs of human civilization, just an untouched alien world with demogorgons wandering around like wild animals. We see this version in Season 4 when Vecna has his flashback. After 11 blasts him through the gate in 1979, he lands in Dimension X. Not the vine-covered mirror of Hawkins we're familiar with, but this empty, hostile dimension. He's burned and scarred by the otherworldly lightning, his body slowly transforming into the monstrous form we know as Vecna. And this is where Henry Creel, who became Vecna, starts his reign. But even before that, there's an earlier connection, the Philadelphia experiment connection, if you're familiar with it. This is going back to the 1950s, according to some of the deeper lore from the first Shadow play, and hints dropped throughout the series. The USS Eldridge, an American naval ship, was supposedly part of a top-secret experiment involving teleportation and dimensional travel. Something went catastrophically wrong, and crew members were exposed to Dimension X. One of those crew members was the father of Dr. Martin Brenner. Yes, that Brenner. The creepy scientist who ran Hawkins' lab. Brenner's father came back from that experiment changed, traumatized by what he'd seen. He told his son about this other dimension, this impossible place that shouldn't exist. And Martin Brenner, being the obsessive scientist he was, dedicated his entire life to unlocking the gates to this dimension. That's why he was so fixated on finding children with psychic abilities. He needed someone powerful enough to tear through the fabric of reality. Now here's where Henry Creel's story gets really interesting. As a young boy in the 1950s, Henry was playing in a cave system near Hawkins. This cave, which we now know from the first shadow play in Season 5 is going to be super important, contained a piece of equipment. Stolen equipment from the Philadelphia experiment, actually, hidden there by someone trying to keep it away from the government. Henry, being a curious kid, found it and accidentally activated it. He was transported to Dimension X. He encountered something there, the entity that would later become the Mind Flayer, though at that point it was just a swirling mass of sentient particles, a black cloud of conscious energy. Henry somehow survived and made it back to the real world, but he was changed. That encounter gave him his psychic abilities, his telekinesis, his telepathy, his ability to see into people's minds and exploit their darkest memories. So Henry was patient zero, in a way, the first human to make contact with Dimension X and survive. But that childhood trip didn't last long enough for him to truly understand what he'd found. It wasn't until 1979, when 11 sent him back there after their battle at Hawkins' lab, that Henry really explored Dimension X and decided to claim it as his own. This is where Vecna's origin story gets properly dark. After being banished to Dimension X, Henry is alone in this barren, hostile world. He's been deformed by the lightning, his body is breaking down, but his powers are growing stronger. He's no longer bound by the inhibitor chip Brenner had implanted in his neck. He's free, and he's furious. He encounters the Mind Flayer's true form, that massive cloud of sentient particles floating in the void. According to Vecna's own words in Season 4, this dimension was unspoiled by mankind. It was pure, untouched, waiting for someone to shape it. And shape it he did. Using his psychic abilities, Henry moulded the Mind Flayer's particle cloud into a form that satisfied him. A giant spider. This wasn't random. Henry had been obsessed with spiders since childhood, particularly black widow spiders. He saw them as perfect predators, misunderstood and underestimated because of their size, so he transformed this cosmic entity into a massive arachnid with a flame-shaped head, a creature that could serve as an extension of his will. That's the Mind Flayer we see in Seasons 2 and 3, the shadow monster in the sky, the entity that possesses will and later creates a flesh monster from melted humans. It's all Vecna. He's been pulling the strings the entire time. But here's the question that's been dividing fans since Season 4. Who's actually in charge? Is Vecna controlling the Mind Flayer, or is the Mind Flayer controlling Vecna? The show presents it as Vecna being the mastermind. He found the Mind Flayer's particles, shaped them, and uses them as a tool to enact his will across dimensions. When the Mind Flayer speaks, it's Vecna speaking. When Billy Hargrove is possessed in Season 3 and delivers that creepy monologue, that's Vecna's voice coming through. But there's another theory, and it's one that the first shadow play actually leans into pretty heavily. What if the Mind Flayer was always sentient? What if it was manipulating Henry from the very beginning, guiding him toward becoming Vecna so it could use him as a vessel to invade the human world? This theory suggests that Henry's childhood encounter with the Mind Flayer in the 1950s was the entity planting seeds in his mind. His psychic powers, his violent tendencies, his hatred of humanity. All of it influenced by the Mind Flayer's corruption. Then when 11 sent him back to Dimension X in 1979, the Mind Flayer was waiting for him. It allowed Henry to think he was in control, shaping the particles into a spider form, but really, it was the Mind Flayer that shaped Henry into Vecna. I'm not going to lie, this theory is proper unsettling. The idea that Vecna, for all his power and planning, is just a puppet for an even older, more alien intelligence is genuinely terrifying. It also raises questions about whether defeating Vecna will actually solve anything, or if the Mind Flayer will just find another host. The Duffer Brothers have been pretty cagey about answering this definitively. In interviews, they've said that Season 5 will reveal what the Upside Down really is, which suggests there's more to this story than we currently understand. They've also mentioned that Vecna and the Mind Flayer's relationship is more complex than it appears. Now back to the upside down itself. So we've established that Dimension X is the primordial wasteland and Vecna's domain. But when and how did the upside down, the mirror version of Hawkins, come into existence? The prevailing theory, which the show heavily implies, is that the upside down was created on November 6th, 1983, when Eleven made contact with the Demogorgon during her sensory deprivation experiment at Hawkins' lab. That psychic connection, that moment of contact between Eleven and a creature from Dimension X, tore open a gate. And in that moment, Dimension X somehow copied Hawkins, creating a dark mirror of the town, frozen at that exact point in time. That's why Nancy's room is stuck in 1983. That's why the Upside Down has the buyer's house, the school, all of Hawkins' structures, but they are all decaying and covered in vines. It's a snapshot, a corrupted copy, created at the moment the gate opened. But if that's true, it raises some really interesting questions. Why did Dimension X mirror Hawkins specifically? Was it because of Eleven's psychic imprint? Was it Vecna's doing, preparing the battlefield for his eventual invasion? Or is there something special about Hawkins itself that made this connection possible? Some fans have theorized that Hawkins sits on some kind of nexus point, a thin spot in reality where the barriers between dimensions are naturally weaker. That would explain why the government chose to build their lab there in the first place, and why gates keep opening in and around the town. There's also this really interesting detail from Season 5 that we'll probably get more explanation about. The cave that Max hides in, the same cave from Henry's childhood, apparently exists in both dimensions. It's not part of the frozen 1983 snapshot. It's older, a natural connection point that predates Vecna, predates the lab, maybe even predates Hawkins itself. According to the Duffer Brothers, in their recent Variety interview, this cave is the same location featured in the first Shadow play. It's where young Henry first encountered Dimension X in the 1950s. And in Season 5, it's revealed that Vecna is genuinely terrified of this cave. An all-powerful dimension-hopping psychic monster, afraid of a hole in the ground. Why? The theory I find most compelling is that the cave represents something Vecna can't control. It's a portal he didn't create, a connection to Dimension X that exists outside his influence. If he enters it, he might be severed from his hive mind, cut off from the Mind Flayer, vulnerable in a way he hasn't been since 1979. That vulnerability could be exactly what our heroes need to defeat him. The whole mythology is super layered, and I love that the show has built this much depth into what could have just been spooky alternate dimension. The fact that there's Dimension X, then the creation of the Upside Down, then Vecna's manipulation of both, and potentially the Mind Flayer's manipulation of Vecna, it's just really clever storytelling. And we haven't even gotten to how the hive mind works yet. The hive mind is this psychic network that connects all the creatures in the Upside Down. Demogorgons, Demodogs, Demobats, the vines, the tentacles, even the Mind Flayer itself. They're all linked through Vecna's consciousness. Hurt one part of the hive, and you hurt all of it. That's why in Season 2, when Eleven closed the gate, all the Demodogs died instantly. The psychic connection was severed. It's also why in Season 4, when the gang in Russia uses a flamethrower on the Demogorgons in the prison, the vines in Hawkins react and release Steve, Nancy and Robin. They're all connected. What's really interesting is that this hive mind seems to work across dimensions. Vecna can control creatures in both Dimension X and the Upside Down simultaneously. He can even reach into the human world through his psychic connection, which is how he's able to target and kill people from the Upside Down without ever leaving it. That's Season 4's big reveal, right? Vecna has been using his victims' deaths to create new gates, each murder opening another rift between dimensions. 4 gates arranged in a cross pattern, and when the 4th one opens, Hawkins is basically doomed. The barriers collapse, the Upside Down bleeds through, and Vecna can walk into the human world without any resistance. He got 3 gates before Max disrupted his plan. But Season 5 shows us he's not done. He's adapted his strategy. which we'll talk about more later. For now, the important thing to understand is that the Upside Down, Dimension X, Vecna, and the Mind Flayer are all interconnected in ways that the show is still peeling back. Each season has added new layers to the mythology, and Season 5 is promising to finally answer the biggest questions. What is the Upside Down really? Who created it? Is Vecna truly in control, or is he being manipulated? And can it be destroyed, or only closed off? I suppose we'll find out soon enough. But talking a bit about Vecna himself and his grand plan, because understanding where he came from is only half the story. The other half is understanding what he's actually trying to accomplish. Now let's talk about what Vecna's actually trying to accomplish, because it's evolved quite a bit from just angry psychopath wants revenge. When we first learn about Vecna in Season 4, the initial impression is that he's targeting teenagers with trauma. Chrissy Cunningham, Fred Benson, Patrick McKinney, and Max Mayfield. All of them carried guilt, shame, or deep psychological wounds. Vecna would infiltrate their minds, force them to relive their worst memories, and then kill them in this horrific way where their bones snap and their eyes collapse inward. Brutal stuff, but the targeting wasn't random sadism. Each kill served a purpose. Vecna needed 4 deaths to create 4 gates, arranged in a specific pattern across Hawkins. When those 4 gates opened simultaneously, they would merge into a massive rift, allowing the Upside Down to bleed through into the human world. The barriers between dimensions would collapse, and Vecna could step through without any resistance. He got 3 out of 4 before Max disrupted the plan. Thanks to her friends playing Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush and Eleven diving into her mind to help, Max survived long enough to throw off Vecna's timing. She technically died, but Eleven brought her back. Sort of. Max's body is alive, but her consciousness is trapped somewhere else. We'll get to that later. The point is, Vecna's Season 4 plan was about opening gates through murder. Psychic murder, specifically, targeting people whose trauma made them vulnerable to his mental manipulation. But Season 5 shows us he's adapted his strategy. And honestly, it's so much worse. Instead of targeting traumatized teenagers one at a time, Vecna's now kidnapping children en masse. Young kids from Hawkins, probably between the ages of 6 and 12. Holly Wheeler is the most prominent example we see in Volume 1, but she's not the only one. There are multiple children taken into the Upside Down and placed in Vecna's mindscape. Why children specifically? According to Vecna's own words to Holly, they're the perfect vessels. This is where things get really dark. Children are easier to manipulate than adults or teenagers. Their minds are more malleable, more susceptible to psychic influence. They're also more likely to trust authority figures, even creepy burned Spider-Men, pretending to be friendly, imaginary friends. Vecna appears to Holly as Mr. Whatsit, a character from her favourite book, A Wrinkle in Time. He creates this false sense of safety and comfort, telling her she's in her childhood home and she can do whatever she wants. It's insidious. He's grooming these children psychically, preparing them to become extensions of his will. The theory that's gained the most traction is that Vecna is building what fans are calling the cult of Vecna. This actually has precedent in the show itself. Back in Season 4, Eddie Munson was running a Dungeons & Dragons campaign for the Hellfire Club, and one of the elements he introduced was the cult of Vecna. In D&D lore, Vecna has followers who worship him and carry out his will. Eddie's campaign was foreshadowing the real thing. In Season 5, these kidnapped children aren't just hostages, they're being converted into followers, or batteries or vessels, something that will amplify Vecna's power beyond what he's capable of alone. If he can link their minds to his hive mind network, he could potentially control them all simultaneously, using their combined psychic energy to fuel his invasion of the human world. It's like what he did with Billy Hargrove and the other flayed residents in Season 3, but on a much larger and more sophisticated scale. Instead of melting them into a flesh monster, He's keeping them intact, using their consciousness as nodes in his network. And here's where the D&D parallels get really interesting. In Dungeons & Dragons, Vecna is a lich, an undead wizard who has achieved immortality by binding his soul to a phylactery. He's also known for seeking godhood, for wanting to ascend beyond mortal limitations and become a true deity. What if that's what Stranger Things Vecna is doing? Using these children as his phylacteries, his anchors to existence. If his physical form in the Upside Down is destroyed, his consciousness could transfer into one of these vessels and he'd survive. You'd have to destroy every single child he's connected to in order to truly kill him. That's a horrifying thought, and it raises the stakes massively for our heroes. How do you fight an enemy who's using children as human shields? How do you destroy Vecna without harming innocent kids who've been psychically enslaved? I'm not going to lie, when I first realised where Season 5 was going with this, I was proper disturbed. It's one thing for Vecna to target guilty, traumatised teenagers who had some agency in the situation. It's another thing entirely to target children who have done absolutely nothing wrong except exist in Hawkins at the wrong time. But it makes sense for his character. Vecna, or Henry Creel, has always hated humanity. His whole philosophy is that humans are a plague on existence, that they corrupt everything they touch with their violence and hypocrisy. He sees himself as a predator purging the world of a parasitic species. Children, in his twisted worldview, are the purest form of humanity before society corrupts them. They're also the future of the species. If he can control children, mould them to his will, he's not just conquering the present. He's ensuring there's no future for humanity beyond what he allows. It's genocidal, basically. Vecna isn't just trying to kill people or open gates anymore. He's trying to fundamentally reshape humanity itself, using these children as the building blocks of his new world order. There's also this really interesting layer about Vecna's personal history that makes his targeting of children even more disturbing. Henry Creel killed his own mother and sister when he was a child. His father, Victor Creel, was blamed and institutionalized for murders his son committed. Henry's childhood was the origin of his power and his hatred, so when he targets children now, there's this twisted mirror of his own past. He's doing to other families what he did to his own. He's taking children and turning them into monsters, just like he was turned into a monster. Whether he recognizes this parallel or not is unclear, but it's definitely intentional on the Duffer Brothers' part. Now let's talk about Holly Wheeler specifically, because she's the child we spend the most time with in Volume 1, and her journey is really telling about Vecna's methods. Holly is Karen and Ted Wheeler's youngest child, Nancy and Mike's little sister. She's maybe 7 or 8 years old, sweet, innocent, loves books. Her favourite is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle, which is about children travelling through dimensions to rescue their father from an evil entity. The parallels aren't subtle. In Volume 1, Holly is kidnapped by a Demogorgon and taken into the Upside Down. But instead of being immediately killed or absorbed into the hive mind like you'd expect, she ends up in a reconstructed version of the Creel house. Specifically, she's in a mental construct that looks like the house, but it's actually inside Vecna's mindscape. This is where Vecna appears to her as Mr. Whatsit. In A Wrinkle in Time, there are 3 cosmic beings who help the children on their quest: Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Witch. Mrs. Whatsit is the youngest and most approachable of the 3. She's eccentric, but ultimately benevolent, a guide for the children. Vecna is mimicking that. He's presenting himself as a helpful, friendly figure. He tells Holly that she's in her childhood home and that she's safe. He encourages her to explore, to do whatever she wants. He's building trust, making her believe that he's on her side. But there are cracks in the illusion. Holly notices things that don't quite add up. Certain actions that Mr. Whatsit says he can't perform. Inconsistencies in the environment. Her child's logic is picking up on the wrongness of the situation, even if she doesn't fully understand what's happening. This is where Max Mayfield enters the picture. Max, whose consciousness has been trapped in Vecna's mindscape since the end of Season 4, has been hiding in a cave system. She's been leaving clues, trying to guide other trapped victims to safety. When Holly arrives, Max manages to get a map to her, leading Holly to the cave. The cave is significant for multiple reasons, which we'll get into more later, but the key thing is that it's a place Vecna can't fully control. It exists outside his mindscape construct, a real physical location that bridges dimensions. When Holly reaches Max in the cave, she's momentarily free from Vecna's direct influence. Max explains what's really happening, that they're not in Hawkins, that Mr. Whatsit is actually the monster that's been killing people, that Holly needs to be strong and resist his manipulations. It's a really powerful scene, actually. Sadie Sink has talked about in interviews how important it was to her that Max, even in her trapped state, becomes a protector for Holly and the other children. Max has been victimized by Vecna before. She knows his methods, and now she's using that knowledge to fight back in the only way she can, by warning and helping other potential victims. But here's the question. What does Vecna actually want with Holly, specifically? Is she just one of many victims, or is there something special about her? There's a theory that Holly's connection to Nancy and Mike makes her particularly valuable. Nancy was the one who discovered Vecna's identity in Season 4. She saw his memories, learned about Henry Creel and Victor Creel. She's been one of the most effective members of the group, fighting against the Upside Down. Mike, meanwhile, is the heart of the original party. He's been Eleven's boyfriend and anchor since Season 1. He's also Will's best friend, and Will is turning out to have his own significant role in all this. If Vecna can psychically control Holly, he could potentially use her as a weapon against her siblings. Imagine Nancy having to fight her own little sister, or Mike having to watch Holly turned into a vessel for Vecna's consciousness. The psychological warfare would be devastating. There's also the symbolic element. The Wheeler family represents normalcy in Hawkins. Ted Wheeler is oblivious to the supernatural chaos. Karen is the archetypal suburban mom, and Holly is pure innocence. By corrupting Holly, Vecna is showing that no one is safe. Even the most innocent, most protected members of the community can be touched by his influence. But beyond Holly, there are other children. We see glimpses of them in Volume 1. Kids from Hawkins who've been taken, whose parents are probably losing their minds trying to find them. The military quarantine of the town means nobody can leave, nobody can call for help beyond what's already there. It's creating this pressure cooker situation where the government is hunting 11, Vecna is kidnapping children, and the adults of Hawkins are starting to realise that something has gone catastrophically wrong with their town. But they don't have the full picture. They don't know about the Upside Down, or Vecna, or the psychic battle being fought in parallel to the physical one. This actually brings up another layer to Vecna's plan that I think is really clever writing. He's not just attacking Hawkins supernaturally, he's creating chaos on multiple fronts simultaneously. The military occupation of Hawkins, led by Dr. K, is supposedly there to contain the situation after the rifts opened at the end of Season 4, but their real priority seems to be capturing 11. They see her as a threat, as the cause of all the supernatural disasters, which, to be fair, isn't entirely wrong from their perspective. 11 did open the first gate. She did fight the Demogorgon. She was present when the Mind Flayer attacked. From the government's point of view, everywhere 11 goes, chaos follows. But what they don't understand is that 11 is also the only one who can fight Vecna on a psychic level. Without her, Hawkins is defenseless. So Vecna's strategy is multifaceted. Kidnap children to build his cult of vessels. Let the government hunt 11, keeping her distracted and weakened. Create chaos and fear among the civilian population. And all the while, He's safe in the upside down, pulling strings and waiting for the perfect moment to make his move. It's actually pretty brilliant, in a horrifying way. Now, one of the questions fans have been asking is, why did Vecna wait so long? If he's been in control since 1979, why didn't he invade Hawkins earlier? Why all the complicated plans with the Demogorgon in Season 1, the Mind Flayer in Seasons 2 and 3, and only revealing himself in Season 4? The answer seems to be that he was building strength and testing defences. Each season's attack was a probing action, gathering information about Eleven's capabilities and the group's resistance strategies. The Demogorgon in Season 1 was essentially reconnaissance. See what happens when a gate opens, see how humans respond, see if 11 can close it. The Mind Flayer's possession of Will and the Demodog army in Season 2 was about establishing a foothold. If 11 hadn't closed the gate, the Mind Flayer would have slowly converted all of Hawkins into upside-down territory. Season 3's Flesh Monster approach was more aggressive, a direct attempt to build a physical body in the human world that could challenge 11 directly. It almost worked. 11 lost her powers after that fight, which was exactly what Vecna needed. And Season 4 was the endgame. With 11 depowered, Vecna revealed himself and started his ritual to permanently merge the dimensions. He got most of the way there before being stopped. Now in Season 5, he's adapted again. He knows 11 is getting her powers back. He knows the group understands his methods, so he's changing tactics, going after children who can't fight back, building a network of vessels that will make him nearly impossible to destroy. It's an escalation strategy that shows Vecna isn't just powerful. He's intelligent and patient. He learns from his failures. He adapts. He's been playing a long game for decades, and he's willing to take setbacks as long as he's moving toward his ultimate goal. And what is that ultimate goal, really? It's not just killing everyone in Hawkins. It's not even just merging the dimensions. Based on what we know about Henry Creel's philosophy and what the Duffer Brothers have said about Season 5 answering big questions, Vecna's goal is to reshape reality itself. He wants to eliminate humanity and create a world where only predators exist, where the strong dominate the weak without the false morality that human society imposes. He sees himself as a purifying force, burning away the corruption of civilization to reveal the pure, violent nature underneath. It's nihilistic and misanthropic to an extreme degree, and it makes him a genuinely terrifying villain because he's not doing this for power or revenge alone. He genuinely believes he's right. He thinks humanity is a disease, and he's the cure. The fact that he's using children to accomplish this makes it even more twisted. He's literally destroying the future to create his vision of paradise. There's also this element of Vecna wanting to prove himself superior to 11. She's the one who defeated him before, who sent him to the Upside Down, who stopped his plans multiple times. In his mind, she represents everything he hates about humanity, their bonds, their hope, their refusal to accept his version of truth. Every move he makes in Season 5 seems designed not just to win, but to break 11 specifically, to prove that his way is right and her way is naive and doomed to fail. The psychological warfare between Vecna and 11 is one of the core conflicts of the final season. It's not just about power levels or who has stronger telekinesis. It's about two fundamentally opposed worldviews clashing, with the fate of Hawkins and potentially all of reality hanging in the balance. And here's where things get really interesting. The introduction of Carly, or 8, back into the story adds a new dimension to this conflict. Carly has illusion powers. She can make you see things that aren't there, experience things that aren't real. In Volume 1, we discover that the military has been using Carly as 11's kryptonite. Somehow Carly's illusion abilities interfere with 11's telekinesis. Whether this is because illusions disrupt psychic focus, or because there's some deeper connection between their powers, isn't entirely clear yet. But it means Vecna has been benefiting from Carly's captivity. With 11's powers being dampened by Carly's forced proximity, Vecna has had an easier time executing his plans without interference. If 11 can free Carly and potentially recruit her as an ally, that changes the game. Two of Brenner's numbered children, working together, might have the combined strength to challenge Vecna in ways that neither could alone. There's also the tantalizing possibility that other numbered children are still alive somewhere. Brenner's experiments created at least 17 children that we know of, possibly more. Where are the others? Are they dead, hiding, or has Vecna already found and corrupted them? The idea of Vecna having an army of psychic children under his control is absolutely chilling, but it would also give our heroes a mission beyond just defeat the monster. They'd have to rescue and potentially rehabilitate kids who've been turned into weapons. This moral complexity is part of what makes Season 5 feel different from earlier seasons. It's not just about fighting monsters anymore. It's about saving people who've become monsters, or preventing people from becoming monsters in the first place. And Vecna knows this. He knows that the hero's compassion is both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. They won't sacrifice innocent children to stop him, even if that's the most tactically sound move. They'll try to save everyone, which divides their attention and resources. He's weaponizing their humanity against them. It's cruel, it's manipulative, and it's exactly the kind of strategy you'd expect from someone who spent decades studying human psychology and learning how to exploit emotional vulnerabilities. The question is whether the heroes can turn that weakness into a strength. Whether their refusal to compromise their values, even in the face of impossible odds, becomes the very thing that defeats Vecna. Because if there's one consistent theme in Stranger Things, it's that love and friendship and human connection are more powerful than any supernatural ability. That's how they've won before, not through superior firepower or psychic strength, but through working together, protecting each other, refusing to give up on one another. Vecna is counting on that being a weakness, but what if it's actually the key to his defeat? Since we're on the topic of children with powers and their role in fighting Vecna, we need to talk about the one kid who's been at the centre of this since the very beginning. The one whose disappearance started everything. Will Byers. Will Byers has been through absolute hell, literally. And for 9 years we've been asking, why him? What made him special? Season 5 finally started answering that question, and honestly, I wasn't ready for it. When Will disappeared on November 6, 1983, it kicked off the entire series. A 12-year-old boy vanishes while riding his bike home from a D&D session at Mike Wheeler's house. 1 minute he's there, the next he's gone, taken by the Demogorgon into the Upside Down. That's how it started, and from that moment, Will's life has been an endless series of trauma, possession, and connection to forces he never asked to be part of. Season 1 was about rescuing him from the Upside Down. He spent a week trapped there, hunted by the Demogorgon, somehow surviving in that toxic dimension when by all rights he should have died within hours. He was found alive, barely, and brought home. Everyone thought the nightmare was over. It wasn't. Season 2 showed us that Will hadn't really escaped. He was having visions of the Upside Down, seeing the Mind Flayer in the sky, experiencing these episodes where he'd slip between dimensions. His doctors thought it was PTSD. His mum knew it was something more. And she was right. The Mind Flayer possessed him, used him as a spy, looking through his eyes to track the movements of Hopper, Joyce, and the others. Will became a puppet, an extension of the Mind Flayer's consciousness. They had to literally burn the possession out of him with heat, nearly killing him in the process. Season 3, Will was mostly free, but he still had that connection. He could sense when the Mind Flayer was near. That true sight, as it's called in D&D, the ability to see through illusions and detect supernatural presences. The back of his neck would tingle. He knew things before anyone else did. Season 4, Will is older, more withdrawn, clearly dealing with a lot of internalized pain. His childhood was stolen, His innocence was destroyed. He spent crucial developmental years being traumatized by interdimensional horror. And on top of that, he's struggling with his sexuality, his identity, his feelings for Mike that he can't express. It's a lot for one person to carry. But through all of this, one question remained unanswered. Why Will? Why was he the first victim? What made Vecna target him specifically on that November night in 1983? Before looking into Season 5's revelations, I honestly thought it was just random. Wrong place, wrong time. Will was the vulnerable kid riding home alone, and the Demogorgon happened to be hunting in that area. Pure chance. Turns out it was anything but random. Season 5. Volume 1 opens with a flashback. We see the night Will disappeared, but from a different perspective. We're inside Will's mind as the Demogorgon approaches. And there, in the background of his consciousness, we see something else. A presence, a connection that predates that night. Vecna was already in Will's head. Not possessing him, not fully, but connected, watching. The same way he watches his other victims before he strikes, but with Will, the connection goes deeper and further back than we realized. The Duffer brothers have confirmed in interviews that they've been planning Will's powers for as long as we can remember. This wasn't a last-minute addition. From the very beginning, Will was meant to be more than just a victim. He was chosen for a reason. But what reason? The theory that's gained the most traction, and which Season 5 is strongly hinting at, is that Will has latent psychic abilities similar to Eleven's. Not the same. Will never went through Brenner's experiments. He wasn't subjected to the same training and trauma. But he has something. A natural sensitivity to the upside down, to psychic forces, to the dimensional barriers between worlds. Vecna sensed this, recognized it, and wanted to claim Will as his own before anyone else could. Think about it. In Season 1, Will survived a week in the upside down without any training, any weapons, any powers. How? Castle Byers, his makeshift fort, provided some shelter. But other people, who've been briefly exposed to the upside down, have died within hours from the toxic atmosphere. Will lasted 7 days. In Season 2, the Mind Flayer possessed Will, but Will fought back. He was able to give his mom and friends clues, to resist the possession long enough for them to save him. Most people would have been completely subsumed by the Mind Flayer's consciousness. Will retained enough of himself to fight. In Season 3, even after the possession ended, Will could still sense the Mind Flayer's presence. That connection wasn't completely severed. It was dormant, but it persisted. And now in Season 5, we're seeing what that connection actually is. What it means. What Will is capable of when he stops being afraid of it and starts using it. Episode 4, Sorcerer, is where everything changes. The episode title itself is significant. In Dungeons & Dragons, Will's character is Will the Wise, a sorcerer class. Sorcerers, unlike wizards who learn magic through study, have innate magical abilities. They're born with power. The episode builds to this massive action sequence. The military base in Hawkins is being overrun by creatures from the upside down. Demogorgons are slaughtering soldiers. Robin, Murray, and a group of children are trying to escape in a truck, but they're being chased. Lucas, Mike, and Robin are cornered by multiple Demogorgons, about to be killed. And then Will does something nobody expected. He stops them. All of them. Every single Demogorgon freezes in place mid-attack, and we see Will standing there, nose bleeding like Eleven does when she uses her powers, his hand raised. He's not just sensing the creatures, he's controlling them. He can see through their eyes. He realizes this in the moment, experiencing what they experience. And then with a series of deliberate gestures, he snaps their limbs. One by one, the Demogorgons collapse, bones broken, killed by invisible psychic force. It's one of the most powerful moments in the entire series. Will Byers, the kid who's been victimized since episode 1, finally fighting back. Not with weapons, not with help, but with his own abilities that he didn't even know he had. The final image of Volume 1 is Will raising his head, wiping the nosebleed with his sleeve, staring into the distance with this look of purpose and determination. I'm not going to lie, I actually got chills watching that scene. Noah Schnapp's performance is incredible. You can see the shock, the fear, but also this sense of finally, Will has power. Finally, he's not helpless. But here's where things get complicated. Because Will's powers aren't exactly like Eleven's. Eleven has telekinesis and psychic projection. She can move objects, enter people's minds, fight in the psychic void. Her abilities are versatile and powerful. Will's abilities seem more specific. He can control creatures of the Upside Down. He can see through their eyes, tap into the hive mind that Vecna has created. It's less about raw telekinetic force and more about psychic connection and manipulation. Which makes sense when you think about it. Will has been connected to the Upside Down longer than anyone else. He was possessed by the Mind Flayer, linked to Vecna's consciousness. Those experiences didn't just traumatize him, they changed him. Gave him access to the same psychic network that Vecna uses to control his creatures. In a way, Will has become Vecna's opposite number. Where Vecna uses the hive mind to spread death and corruption, Will might be able to use it to protect and heal. Where Vecna turns creatures into weapons, Will might be able to free them or turn them against their master. It's poetic, honestly, the first victim becoming the key to defeating the villain. But there's a darker possibility that a lot of fans are worried about. What if Will's connection to Vecna goes deeper than we think? What if Vecna's plan all along was to turn Will into his vessel, his backup plan, his heir? This theory is proper unsettling. The idea is that Vecna marked Will in 1983, planted a seed of his consciousness in Will's mind during that first week in the Upside Down. Then through the Season 2 possession, Vecna strengthened that connection. And now, in Season 5, Will's powers might actually be Vecna's powers manifesting through him. If that's true, then every time Will uses his abilities, he's drawing on Vecna's consciousness. He's opening himself up to Vecna's influence. And at some point, Vecna might be able to take control completely, turning Will against his friends and family. The Season 5 trailers and promotional materials have shown several shots of Will looking conflicted, afraid, like he's fighting something internal. There's this recurring visual motif of Will touching the back of his neck, the same spot where the Mind Flayer's possession began in Season 2. What if it never fully left? What if Vecna has always had a back door into Will's mind, just waiting for the right moment to activate it? That would be heartbreaking. Will has been through so much already. To have his moment of empowerment, his discovery of his abilities, turn out to be a trap, to become the very thing he's been fighting against, it would destroy him. And it would destroy his friends, Mike especially. Mike and Will have been best friends since they were little kids. Mike was the one who led the search for Will in Season 1. He's the one who's been trying to protect Will, support him, even when he doesn't fully understand what Will is going through. If Mike had to fight Will, had to potentially hurt or kill his best friend to stop Vecna from using him as a puppet, that's nightmare fuel right there. But I don't think the show is going to go full tragic with Will's arc. The Duffer Brothers have said multiple times that Season 5 is about bringing things full circle, answering questions that were set up in Season 1. Will's journey has to have meaning beyond just the kid who suffered the most. There's another theory, one I personally find more compelling, that Will's power isn't about telekinesis or mind control. It's about being the heart of the group, the emotional anchor, the one who reminds everyone why they're fighting. This comes from Mike's speech back in Season 2. When Will was possessed and they were trying to reach him, Mike talked about how Will is the heart of their party. He's not the loudest or the bravest or the strongest, but he's the one who holds them together. He's the reason they became friends in the first place. What if that's Will's actual superpower? Not the ability to control demogorgons, but the ability to strengthen the bonds between people, to amplify the power of friendship and love and connection. It sounds cheesy when I say it like that, but hear me out. Stranger Things has always been about the power of human connection defeating supernatural evil. Every season, the heroes win, not because they're stronger than the villain, but because they work together, because they refuse to give up on each other. Eleven's powers come from love, her connection to her mother, to Hopper, to Mike, to her friends. When she's fighting for people she cares about, she's unstoppable. When she's isolated, she falters. What if Will's ability is to enhance that, to create a psychic link between his friends that makes them more effective, more coordinated, more powerful as a group? That would explain why Vecna targeted him first. Vecna's entire philosophy is based on isolation, on the idea that humans are weak and selfish when separated from their social bonds. Will represents the opposite of that philosophy. He's the living embodiment of community and connection. By taking Will, Vecna was trying to break the heart of Hawkins, to prove that even the most innocent, most beloved member of the community could be corrupted and destroyed. But it didn't work. Will survived. And now he's become something Vecna didn't anticipate. Not a victim, not a vessel, but a hero with powers that directly counter Vecna's worldview. There's also this really beautiful parallel between Will and Eleven that I think is going to be important in the final episodes. Eleven was raised in a lab, experimented on, turned into a weapon by Brenner. She had to learn how to be human, how to form connections, how to trust and love. Will is the opposite. He grew up in a loving home, with friends who care about him, with a community that fought to bring him back. He's always been human. Now he's learning how to be powerful. Together, they represent two sides of the same coin. The weapon learning to be human, and the human learning to be a weapon. And neither of them wants to be what they were forced to become. They just want to protect the people they love. If the final battle comes down to Eleven and Will working together, combining their abilities to defeat Vecna, that would be such a satisfying conclusion to both their arcs. The girl who opened the first gate and the boy who was taken through it, united against the monster who's been manipulating them both since the beginning. Now there's one more aspect of Will's Season 5 arc that I need to talk about, and it's his relationship with Robin Buckley. In Volume 1, Robin and Will end up working together, trying to figure out Will's connection to Vecna and how to use it to predict his next move. And in the process, they bond, really bond, over their shared struggles with identity and belonging. Robin, as we know from Season 3, is gay. She came out to Steve in that iconic bathroom scene, and since then she's been navigating what it means to be queer in small-town Indiana in the 1980s. It's not easy, it's isolating. There aren't many people she can be fully honest with. Will is going through the same thing. He's clearly gay, or at least queer, though he hasn't come out explicitly. His feelings for Mike have been subtextual throughout Season 4, and in Season 5, those feelings are still present, but even more complicated by everything else happening. Robin recognizes this in Will, sees herself in him, and she reaches out, talks to him about identity, about being your true self, about how hard it is, but how necessary it is. And it's Robin's words, her acceptance and understanding, that help Will unlock his powers at the end of Episode 4. I love that. I love that Will's moment of empowerment comes not from anger or revenge, but from self-acceptance, from embracing who he is, all of who he is, and refusing to be ashamed or afraid anymore. It's such a powerful message, especially for a show that's been criticised in the past for how it's handled Will's sexuality. This isn't just subtext anymore, it's text. Will is queer, and his queerness is tied to his strength, not his weakness. The fact that two queer characters are the ones who end up being crucial to defeating Vecna is also just really meaningful. Representation matters, and Stranger Things is finally giving Will the story he deserves. There's still a lot we don't know about Will's powers, and his ultimate role in the final battle. Volume 1 ends with him discovering what he can do, but we haven't seen the full extent of his abilities yet. Can he control all upside-down creatures, or just demogorgons? Can he sever Vecna's connection to the hive mind, or only tap into it? Can he use his powers without bleeding, without exhausting himself? And most importantly, can he do all this without losing himself to Vecna's influence? The opening flashback of Season 5 showed us that Vecna has been connected to Will since 1983. That's a long time. A lot can happen in 9 years. A lot of damage can be done. Will has to walk a very fine line. He needs to use his connection to the Upside Down to fight Vecna, but he can't let that connection consume him. He needs to be powerful enough to make a difference, but human enough to remember what he's fighting for. It's a classic hero's journey in a lot of ways. The young man discovering his power, learning to master it, facing the temptation to use it for the wrong reasons, ultimately choosing to sacrifice himself for the greater good. I really hope Will doesn't die. I know that sounds obvious, but with only 4 episodes left and the Duffer Brothers promising that Season 5 will be emotional and devastating, I'm genuinely worried that Will's arc ends in sacrifice. The poetic justice would be crushing. The boy whose disappearance started everything, whose story we've been following for 9 years, giving his life to save Hawkins and close the Upside Down forever. It would be narratively powerful, it would hurt like hell, and it would absolutely destroy Joyce, Jonathan, Mike, and everyone who's fought so hard to keep him alive. But I don't know if the show needs that kind of tragedy. Stranger Things has always been about hope, about finding light in the darkness. Killing Will would undermine that message. Plus, Noah Schnapp deserves better. He's been playing this character since he was 12 years old. He's grown up with Will, embodied his pain and fear and resilience. To have all that end in death feels wrong. I'm holding out hope that Will survives, that he gets to be happy, that after everything he's been through, he gets a future. Maybe that's naive, maybe I'm setting myself up for heartbreak, but that's what Stranger Things is about, isn't it? Believing in happy endings even when the odds are against you. Speaking of characters whose fate hangs in the balance, we need to talk about 11. And more specifically, we need to talk about the surprise return of someone who was supposed to be a 1-episode character back in Season 2. Let's cover one of the show's biggest surprises from Volume 1, the return of Kali Prasad, also known as 8, and what her reappearance means for 11's journey and the final battle against Vecna. Kali first appeared in Season 2, Episode 7, The Lost Sister. It's the episode that divides the fandom more than any other. Some people love it for expanding the world and giving 11 a different perspective. Others think it's a pointless detour that breaks the momentum of the season. I'm somewhere in the middle, honestly. I appreciate what it was trying to do, even if the execution was a bit clunky. The episode showed us that 11 wasn't the only child with powers who escaped from Hawkins' lab. Kaylee, subject number 008, had gotten out years earlier and built a life for herself in Chicago. She'd gathered a group of outcasts and runaways, using her illusion powers to hunt down the people who'd worked for Brenner and hurt them as children. Carly's power is fascinating. She can't move objects with her mind like 11. Instead, she can make you see things that aren't there. Full sensory illusions that feel completely real. She can make you see a person who isn't present, make a wall disappear, make you experience phantom pain. It's psychological warfare at its finest. When 11 finds her in Season 2, there's this immediate connection. They're sisters in a way, both products of Brenner's experiments, both scarred by what was done to them. Carly tries to convince 11 to join her revenge mission, to embrace anger as a source of power. 11 almost goes along with it, but ultimately, she realizes that revenge isn't what she wants. Her friends need her back in Hawkins, Mike needs her, so she leaves Kaylee behind and returns home. And that was it. The episode ended, 11 went back to Hawkins, and we never saw Carly again. She got 1 episode in 5 seasons. A lot of people assumed she was just a narrative experiment that didn't work out, and the Duffers quietly dropped that storyline. Turns out they were just waiting for the right moment to bring her back. In Season 5, Episode 4, when Eleven and Hopper infiltrate the military base in the Upside Down, they make a discovery. There are holding cells, and in one of those cells, weak and exhausted, is Carly. The military has been using her as a weapon against Eleven. Here's how it works. As far as we understand from Volume 1, Carly's illusion powers don't just affect what you see. They affect psychic perception as well. When she's projecting an illusion, it creates interference in the psychic space, kind of like jamming a radio signal. Eleven's powers rely on psychic clarity. She needs to focus, to visualize what she's trying to do, to maintain a clear connection between her mind and the object or person she's affecting. If that connection is disrupted by illusions and false sensory input, her powers don't work properly. So the military, specifically Dr. K and her team, have been keeping Carly prisoner and using her proximity to Eleven to weaken her. Whenever Eleven tries to use her abilities, Carly's forced illusions interfere, making Eleven's powers unreliable and exhausting to use. It's absolutely diabolical, and it explains why Eleven has been struggling so much in the early episodes of Season 5. It's not that she's lost her powers again, it's that they're being actively suppressed by someone she considered a sister. When Eleven sees Carly in that cell, the look of relief on Carly's face is heartbreaking. Linnea Bertelsen, who plays Carly, has talked about in interviews how important this moment was for the character. Carly has been waiting for Eleven to find her. She's been forced to hurt her sister, and she hates it. The reunion is brief. They don't have time for a long conversation. The military base is under attack, creatures are breaking through, everything is chaos. But Eleven manages to free Carly, and there's this moment of understanding between them. They're on the same side now. Whatever happened in Chicago, whatever differences they had, none of that matters anymore. What matters is stopping Vecna. Now this raises some really interesting questions about the other numbered children from Hawkins' lab. We know there were at least 17, possibly more. Brenner's experiment started in the 1960s or early 1970s and continued until 1979, when Henry Creel, as one, killed almost everyone in the lab. 11 survived because she defeated Henry and sent him to the Upside Down. Kaylee survived because she'd already escaped years earlier. But what about the others? In Season 4, we saw flashbacks to the lab. We saw the other children, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, and so on. Most of them were killed by one during the massacre. We saw their bodies. It was horrific. But were all of them killed? Or did some escape like Carly did? There's a theory that's been floating around since Season 4 that at least a few of the numbered children survived and are in hiding. Either they escaped before the massacre, or they survived the massacre and fled afterward. They could be anywhere, living under assumed names, suppressing their powers to avoid detection, trying to live normal lives. If that's true, then Vecna might know about them. He was one after all. He knew all the other children. He might even know where some of them are. What if Vecna has been hunting them down, either to eliminate potential threats or to recruit them to his cause? That's a terrifying thought. Imagine psychic children, brainwashed by Vecna, using their abilities to help him tear apart reality. Or, on the flip side, what if some of the numbered children are out there fighting against the Upside Down in their own ways? We've only seen Hawkins' perspective on this conflict, but the Upside Down's influence is spreading. Other towns, other countries might be experiencing their own encounters with interdimensional horror. There could be a whole network of people with powers, all connected by their history with Hawkins' lab, working to contain or combat the supernatural threats. That would be a really interesting direction for a potential spin-off series. But for now, in Season 5, the focus is on 11 and Carly. Two sisters, reunited, with complementary powers that could be the key to defeating Vecna. Here's why that's significant. 11's strength is raw power. She can move objects, crush bones, enter minds, fight in the psychic void, but she's also straightforward. Her attacks are direct. Vecna knows how her powers work. He can anticipate them, defend against them. Kali's strength is deception. She can make Vecna see things that aren't there, experience pain that isn't real, doubt his own perceptions. If 11 is the hammer, Kali is the scalpel. Or maybe the smoke bomb. Together, they could create a strategy where Kali disorients Vecna with illusions, while 11 delivers the actual psychic attack. Vecna wouldn't know what's real and what's fake. He'd be fighting phantoms while the real threat comes from an unexpected angle. It's actually pretty clever when you think about it. The Duffer brothers brought Kali back not just to tie up a loose plot thread, but because her specific abilities are uniquely suited to fighting someone like Vecna, who relies on psychological manipulation and mental invasion. You can't manipulate someone who's already being manipulated by someone else. Or rather, you can, but it becomes exponentially more complicated. There's also this element of thematic closure. In Season 2, Kali told 11 that her friends and her Papa Hopper were holding her back, that she needed to embrace her anger and cut ties with her past to become truly powerful. 11 rejected that philosophy. She chose love over anger, chosen family over revenge. And that choice has been vindicated over and over. Her love for her friends is what gives her strength, not what weakens her. But Kali was never proven wrong exactly. She was just left behind. Her storyline was incomplete. Now in Season 5, Kali gets to see that 11 was right. That connection and love are more powerful than isolation and revenge. And she gets to be part of that victory, to contribute to saving the world alongside the sister she thought she'd lost. I love that redemption arc for her. It's not flashy or dramatic, but it's emotionally satisfying. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Dr. Brenner, Martin Brenner. Papa, the man who experimented on children and created both 11's powers and the circumstances that led to the Upside Down being opened in the first place. He died at the end of Season 4, shot by soldiers while helping 11 escape from the government facility. Or did he? In the casting announcements for Season 5, there was a name that caught a lot of attention: Alex Bro. If you're familiar with the first Shadow play, you'll know that Alex Bro plays Dr. Brenner in the stage production, and he's also listed as part of the Season 5 cast in an undisclosed role. Now, the official line is that Alex Bro is playing a different character in Season 5, not Brenner, someone new. But fans are skeptical, and honestly, so am I. Why cast the actor who plays young Brenner in the prequel play if you're not going to use him as Brenner in some capacity? There are a few possibilities. One is flashbacks. Season 5 could show us more of Brenner's past, his early experiments, how he became the monster we know. Alex Bro could be playing Brenner in his younger years, giving us context for his obsession with the Upside Down. Another possibility is clones or psychic projections. This sounds wild, but hear me out. Brenner was obsessed with psychic powers and dimensional travel. What if he created a backup plan? A way to preserve his consciousness or create a duplicate of himself in case his body died? Kaylee's illusion powers could even be involved. What if the Brenner who died in Season 4 was an illusion, and the real Brenner has been hiding somewhere all along? Or, and this is the darkest option, what if Vecna is using Brenner's form to psychologically torture 11? Appearing as Papa, manipulating her guilt, and complicated feelings about the man who raised her and abused her. Any of these would be absolutely devastating for 11. She watched Brenner die. She had a complicated moment of closure with him, where she couldn't quite forgive him but acknowledged that he'd been important to her in some twisted way. If he comes back, if that death is undone or revealed to be fake, it reopens all those wounds. It would be cruel to 11's character arc, but it would also be very Stranger Things. The show has never been afraid to twist the knife when it comes to emotional trauma. I suppose we'll find out in the remaining episodes whether Brenna is truly dead, or if there's one more manipulation waiting. Beyond Brenna, Carly, and 11, there's the broader question of what happens to psychic children in this world. Brenna's experiments didn't happen in a vacuum. The government knew about them, funded them. There must be records, other programs, other attempts to weaponize children with powers. Dr. Owens, the sympathetic scientist from seasons 2 through 4, tried to help 11 and shut down the unethical programs. But he was one person in a massive bureaucracy. There are others who share Brenna's philosophy, who see children like 11 as tools rather than people. Dr. K, the military leader in season 5, represents that faction. She's hunting 11 not to protect her, but to capture her and use her as a weapon against the Upside Down. She doesn't care about 11's humanity or rights. She just wants control. This creates a situation where 11 is being hunted by both Vecna and the government simultaneously. She can't trust either side. She can only trust her friends and family. It's exhausting just thinking about it. 11 has been fighting her entire life. She's never had a real childhood, never had safety or peace. Even when she's living with Hopper or the Byers family, she's always looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next threat. At some point, this has to end. Either 11 defeats Vecna and finds a way to live a normal life, or she doesn't survive the final battle. I really, really hope she survives. Millie Bobby Brown has been the face of Stranger Things since day one. Her performance as 11 is iconic. The character deserves a happy ending. But there's this theory, and it's one that makes me proper nervous, that 11 will have to sacrifice herself to permanently close the Upside Down. The logic goes like this. 11 opened the first gate. Her psychic connection to the Demogorgon in 1983 is what created the bridge between dimensions. So maybe the only way to truly seal that bridge is for 11 to sever the connection from the inside. To go into the Upside Down and essentially destroy herself to destroy the link. It would be poetic, tragic, but poetic. The girl who accidentally started the nightmare being the one who ends it through sacrifice. Mike would be destroyed. Hopper and Joyce would be destroyed. Her friends would be devastated, but it would save the world. I don't want to believe this is where the story's going, but I can't completely dismiss it either. The Duffer Brothers have talked about how season 5 is going to be emotional, how there will be losses, how not everyone makes it out. 11 is the most powerful character in the show. If you want to create genuine tension and stakes in the final battle, you have to put her at real risk. And what bigger risk is there than the ultimate sacrifice? There's a counter theory though, one I prefer. What if 11 doesn't sacrifice herself, but she does sacrifice her powers? What if closing the Upside Down permanently requires 11 to give up her abilities, to sever her connection to the psychic realm, making her fully human with no powers at all? She's wanted to be normal her entire life. She's asked Mike multiple times if he would still care about her if she didn't have powers. The answer is always yes, but there's always been that doubt in her mind, that fear that she's only valuable because she's useful. If she chooses to give up her powers to save everyone, that would be a powerful statement. It would prove that her worth isn't in what she can do, but in who she is. And it would give her the normal life she's always wanted. No more being hunted, no more being experimented on, no more nosebleeds and exhaustion and psychics, battles, just Jane Hopper, regular teenager, living with her family and friends. That's the ending I'm hoping for. 11 alive, powerless but free, finally getting to just be a kid. Whether that's realistic or just wishful thinking, we'll know soon enough. 4 episodes left, and based on everything we've seen so far, those 4 episodes are going to be absolutely brutal. But let's talk about another character whose fate hangs in the balance, someone who technically died at the end of season 4 but whose story is far from over. Max Mayfield. Max Mayfield defied death at the end of season 4, but the cost was brutal. Her body's technically alive, but her mind? That's been trapped somewhere else entirely. somewhere that Holly Wheeler calls Camazotz. Let's rewind to that season 4 finale, The Piggyback, Volume 2, Episode 9. It's one of the most intense, emotionally devastating episodes the show has ever done. And Max is at the centre of it. The plan was for Max to be bait. She'd let Vecna into her mind again, the same way he'd tried to kill her earlier in the season. But this time, she'd be ready. While Vecna was distracted attacking Max in his mindscape, Steve, Nancy, and Robin would attack his physical body in the Creel house, in the Upside Down. Dustin and Eddie would create a distraction with the most epic guitar solo in television history, and Eleven would dive into Max's mind to fight Vecna on the psychic plane. It almost worked. Vecna took the bait. He pulled Max into his mindscape, into that twisted version of the Creel house attic where he keeps his victims. And for a while, the plan held. The physical attacks were hurting him. 11 was fighting him in Max's mind. Everything was going according to plan. But Vecna was stronger than they anticipated. He'd been building power, absorbing energy from his previous victims, growing more formidable. And when he realized what was happening, he adapted. He started killing Max anyway, even while being attacked himself, even while 11 was fighting him. He was doing it out of spite, basically. If he was going down, he was taking Max with him. We watched Max's bones break, her eyes collapse, her body crumple to the ground in Lucas's arms. And then, for a moment that felt like forever, she was dead. Clinically, medically dead. No heartbeat, no breathing. Gone. Lucas was screaming. Sadie Sink's performance was absolutely heartbreaking. You could feel the raw grief and horror. And then 11, from inside Max's mind, refused to let her go. She reached into whatever place souls go when they die, grabbed Max and pulled her back. Restarted her heart, brought her back to life. But something was wrong. Max woke up technically. Her heart was beating. She was breathing, her body was functioning, but her eyes were blank. She wasn't there, not really. Max's consciousness hadn't come back with her body. It was still trapped somewhere in Vecna's mindscape. 11 had saved Max's body, but her mind was still his. Prisoner. That's where season 4 ended, with Max in a coma, her fate uncertain, and Hawkins literally tearing itself apart as the 4 gates merged into a massive rift. Absolutely brutal cliffhanger. Going into season 5, one of the biggest questions was, what happened to Max? Is she brain dead? Is she in there somewhere? Aware but trapped? Can she be brought back? Or is her body just an empty shell being kept alive by machines? Volume 1 gave us answers, and they're both better and worse than we feared. Max is alive. Her consciousness exists, but she's been trapped in Vecna's mindscape for over a year. Specifically, she's in a mental construct that exists alongside the other victims Vecna has taken. It's not the physical Upside Down. It's a psychic space, a shared nightmare that Vecna controls and shapes. Holly Wheeler, after being kidnapped by a Demogorgon in episode 2, ends up in this same space. She appears in what looks like the Creel house, where Vecna greets her as Mr. Whatsit and pretends everything is fine. But Holly, being a clever kid who loves books, recognizes something is off. The environment doesn't feel right. The physics are wrong. Doors lead to places they shouldn't. And Mr. Whatsit can't perform certain actions that a real person should be able to do. Holly's favourite book is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. It's a science fiction novel from 1962 about 3 children who travel through space and time to rescue their father from an evil entity called IT that's taken over a planet called Camazotz. Camazotz is a planet of forced conformity. Everyone there looks the same, acts the same, thinks the same. It controls everyone's minds, creating this false paradise where nobody has free will, but everyone is happy. It's totalitarian nightmare, disguised as utopia. When Holly realizes where she actually is, she names it Camazotz, because that's exactly what Vecna's mindscape feels like. A false reality where he's trying to control everyone's perception and make them believe they're safe and happy when they're actually prisoners. The parallel is quite brilliant, actually. In A Wrinkle in Time, the protagonists defeat IT not through violence, but through love. The main character, Meg, saves her brother by repeatedly telling him she loves him, breaking through IT's control with pure human emotion and connection. That's clearly going to be relevant to how Max and Holly escape love and connection, defeating psychic control. It's very on brand for Stranger Things. Now, Max has been in this mindscape for over a year by the time Holly arrives. That's a long time to be trapped in a psychic prison, controlled by a malevolent entity who wants to use you as a battery for his powers. But Max hasn't given up. She's been fighting back in the only way she can. She's been hiding. There's a cave system in Vecna's mindscape. It's the same cave from Henry Creel's childhood, the place where he first encountered Dimension X in the 1950s. And for some reason, Vecna can't fully control that space. It exists outside his influence, a blind spot in his psychic construct. Max has been hiding there, surviving, waiting for an opportunity. When Holly arrives and starts wandering through the false Creel house, Max sees her chance. She can't leave the cave herself without Vecna detecting her. But she can leave clues, a map, instructions, breadcrumbs leading Holly to safety. Holly finds the map, follows it, and ends up in the cave with Max. The reunion it's everything, honestly. These two characters have never really interacted before. Holly is Mike's little sister, so Max knows of her, but they've never been close. Max has been closer to the older kids, the teenagers dealing with supernatural threats. But now they're both trapped, both vulnerable, and they only have each other. Max explains what's really happening, that Mr. Whatsit is actually the monster, that they're not in Hawkins, they're in his mind, that Holly needs to be strong and not trust anything she sees unless Max confirms it's real. It's a reversal of the usual dynamic. Max has always been the one being protected, being saved by her friends. Now she's the protector. She's the experienced survivor teaching a younger victim how to resist. Sadie Sink has talked about in interviews how important this arc was to her. Max has been through so much trauma, so much loss. Her brother Billy died. She almost died twice. She's been battling depression and PTSD. But here, in the worst possible situation, she finds purpose. She has someone to protect, someone who needs her knowledge and strength. It gives Max a reason to keep fighting when she could have given up long ago. Now, there are other children in the mindscape as well. We see glimpses of them in Volume 1, kids from Hawkins who've been kidnapped over the past year, all trapped in Vecna's psychic construct, all being slowly drained of their energy or converted into vessels for his consciousness. Max knows about them. She's tried to reach them, tried to organize some kind of resistance, but Vecna keeps them separated, isolated in their own personal nightmares. The cave is the only place where his control weakens, where communication is possible. Holly might be the key to changing that. She's new. She's not fully under Vecna's influence yet, and she still has hope. Max is worn down after a year of captivity, but Holly has fight in her. Together, they might be able to reach the other children, wake them up, organize an escape. This brings us to episode 6 of season 5, which is titled Escape from Camazotz. The title is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be about Max, Holly, and potentially the other trapped children breaking free from Vecna's mindscape. How they do it, what the cost is, and who survives the attempt are the big questions. There are several theories about how this could play out. Theory 1. Max sacrifices herself to save the children. This is the dark theory, the one that makes me proper anxious. The idea is that Max has been in the mindscape longest, which means she has the deepest connection to it. She might be able to use that connection to create a distraction or opening for the others to escape, but doing so would trap her permanently or destroy her consciousness entirely. Max has always been willing to sacrifice herself for others. That's literally what she did at the end of season 4. She was bait, knowing full well she might die. She did it anyway because it meant a chance to stop Vecna. If she makes that same choice again, but this time to save Holly and the other children, rather than to hurt Vecna, it would be thematically consistent. Heartbreaking, but consistent. Lucas would be devastated. He's been sitting by Max's comatose body for over a year, refusing to give up hope. If Max's consciousness is destroyed while her body lingers on, that's a fate worse than death in some ways. He'd have to let her go, knowing she's never coming back. I don't want this to happen. Max deserves better. She's been through enough. Let her be happy for once. Theory 2. 11 and Will combine their powers to pull everyone out. This is the hopeful theory. 11 has already proven she can enter the mindscape. She did it at the end of season 4 to fight Vecna while he was attacking Max. And Will's newly discovered abilities might give him access to Vecna's hive mind, which could include the mindscape where the children are trapped. If 11 and Will work together, 11 providing the raw psychic strength and Will providing the navigation through Vecna's consciousness, they might be able to create an exit, a way for Max and the others to escape back to their bodies without having to destroy Vecna first. It wouldn't be easy. Vecna would fight them every step of the way, and there's a risk that entering his mindscape could trap 11 and Will as well. But it's possible. This theory is supported by the fact that Volume 1 ends with both 11 and Will discovering or using their powers in significant ways. Carly is freed, giving 11 a potential ally. Will manifests his abilities, giving him a connection to the hive mind. The pieces are being put in place for a coordinated rescue mission. Theory 3. Max finds a way to weaponize the mindscape against Vecna. This is the clever theory. What if Max, after spending a year trapped in Vecna's consciousness, has learned things? What if she's figured out how the mindscape works, what its rules are, where its weaknesses lie? Vecna uses the mindscape to control people, but what if that control can be turned against him? What if Max, with Holly's help, finds a way to use the mindscape as a weapon? To trap Vecna in his own construct, or to sever his connection to the children he's trying to use as vessels. This would give Max agency in her own rescue. She wouldn't just be the victim waiting to be saved. She'd be active, clever, fighting back with the tools available to her. It would also be a nice callback to season 2, when Max was the one who drove the car during the tunnel sequence. She's always been resourceful, always found ways to contribute, even when others underestimate her. Theory 4. The cave is a backdoor out of the mindscape. Remember how the cave exists in both the real world and Vecna's mindscape, and how Vecna is afraid of it, refuses to enter it, can't fully control it. What if the cave is a literal portal, a way to transfer consciousness between the mindscape and the physical world without going through Vecna's barriers? If Max and Holly can guide the other children to the cave, and if their friends in the real world can find the physical cave and create some kind of anchor or beacon, they might be able to pull everyone out, consciousness flowing through the cave system, returning to bodies that have been waiting for them. It's a bit magical sounding when I explain it like that, but Stranger Things has always had a bit of magic mixed in with the science fiction. The psychic powers, the dimensional rifts, the monsters. It's never been purely scientific. The cave as a sacred space, a nexus point between worlds, feels right for this show. Whichever theory turns out to be correct, there's one thing I'm certain of. The escape is going to be costly. The Duffer Brothers don't do easy rescues. There will be losses. Someone might not make it out. Maybe multiple someones. The question is whether Max is among the survivors or the casualties. I've got my own theory, one that's maybe wishful thinking, but I'm sticking to it. I think Max survives. I think she escapes the mindscape and returns to her body. But I think there are consequences. Maybe she's blind. Her eyes were destroyed by Vecna in season 4. Even if her consciousness returns, Her vision might be gone permanently. She'd have to learn to navigate the world in a new way, rely on her friends in different ways. Or maybe she has lasting psychic damage. Memory loss, personality changes, PTSD that's even more severe than what she was already dealing with. The year in Vecna's mindscape wasn't spent in comfortable unconsciousness. She was awake, aware, trapped. That kind of psychological torture leaves scars. But she's alive. She gets to come home. She gets to see Lucas again, hug her friends, rebuild her life. That's the ending I want for Max. Not perfect, not unmarked by trauma, but alive and moving forward. Because Max represents something important in Stranger Things. She's the character who's dealt with the most personal, mundane trauma on top of the supernatural horror. Her stepbrother Billy was abusive. Her parents' divorce devastated her. She struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts. And then on top of all that, she had to deal with being targeted by an interdimensional monster. Max is every kid who's dealing with real-world problems while also trying to survive external threats they can't control. If Max dies, if her story ends in tragedy, it sends a message that I don't think the show wants to send. That sometimes, no matter how hard you fight, trauma wins. But if Max survives, if she finds a way to heal and build a future, despite everything she's been through, that's a message of hope. That's telling the audience that recovery is possible, that you can survive the unsurvivable. I think that's more valuable than a tragic sacrifice arc, as much as the latter might be narratively powerful. There's also the practical matter that Sadie Sink is one of the show's most talented actors. Her performance as Max has been consistently incredible. The skateboarding scene in Season 2, the Sadie Sink show in Season 4 when she's running from Vecna, the running up that hill sequence that became iconic. She elevates every scene she's in. Killing Max means losing one of your best performers. And while the Duffer Brothers have never been afraid to kill characters for story reasons, I'd like to think they recognise what an asset Sadie Sink is to the show. Plus, Lucas deserves to have Max back. Caleb McLaughlin has been phenomenal, showing Lucas's devotion and grief throughout Season 5. He reads to Max's comatose body, talks to her about basketball and their friends, refuses to give up hope, even when everyone else has. If Max dies after all that, Lucas's arc becomes just unrelenting tragedy. And while Stranger Things doesn't shy away from pain, it's always balanced darkness with hope, loss with love. Lucas and Max getting their happy ending, even if it's complicated and imperfect, feels right. Before looking into all this, I honestly thought Max might be more of a plot device in Season 5, a reason for the heroes to fight Vecna, a character whose fate would motivate others, but who wouldn't have much agency herself. I'm really glad I was wrong. Max is active in Volume 1, even from inside the mindscape. She's protecting Holly, leaving clues, resisting Vecna's control. She's not just a victim waiting to be rescued. She's a fighter working toward her own escape. That's the Max we know and love. Stubborn, resourceful, brave even when she's terrified. And Holly, can we talk about how good Nell Fisher is as Holly Wheeler? She's only got a few scenes in Volume 1, but she completely sells the fear and confusion and gradual realization of what's happening. The moment when she figures out that Mr. Whatsit isn't real, that she's in danger, you can see it in her face. The childhood innocence cracking as the horror seeps in. It's a star-making performance from a young actor. If the show continues in any form, whether through the confirmed animated spin-off or the mysterious second spin-off the Duffers have planned, I hope Nell Fisher comes back. She's brilliant. The dynamic between Max and Holly is one of the unexpected highlights of Season 5 so far. Two characters from different age groups, different social circles, thrown together by circumstance and forming this bond. The older kid who's been victimized, teaching the younger kid how to resist. The younger kid's hope and determination, reinvigorating the older kid's will to survive. It's beautiful, honestly, and it's going to make the escape attempt in Episode 6 all the more tense, because we care about both of them now. We need both of them to make it out. I suppose there's also the possibility that not all the children escape, that some are too far gone, too deeply integrated into Vecna's hive mind to be saved. That would be absolutely devastating, but it would raise the stakes. Every child they save is a victory, but they can't save everyone. Sometimes in war, you have to make impossible choices. Save who you can and live with the guilt of those you couldn't save. If that's the direction they go, it'll hurt. But it would be honest. And Stranger Things has never flinched from honest emotional pain. Whatever happens in Escape from Camazotz, it's going to be one of the most important episodes of the season. It determines Max's fate, Holly's fate, and potentially the fates of multiple other children. It affects Lucas, Mike, Nancy, Karen, the entire Wheeler family. It impacts Eleven's mission, Will's purpose, the group's morale. Everything hinges on whether they can pull off this rescue. And knowing the Duffer Brothers, they're going to make us wait until Christmas Day to find out. Volume 2 drops December 25th, and Episode 6 is presumably going to be in that batch. That's cruel, honestly, making us wait through the holidays, wondering whether Max survives. But also very effective storytelling. The anticipation is killing me, and there are probably millions of fans feeling the same way. At least we're all suffering together, I suppose. Now, while we're on the topic of wild theories and speculation about what happens in the final episodes, we need to talk about some of the more elaborate fan theories. The ones involving time travel, vampires, D&D mythology, and other absolutely mental ideas that might actually be true. So we've been building toward this for a while now, but it's time to dive into some of the wildest, most elaborate theories the fandom has cooked up. Some of these are absolutely mental, but honestly, some might actually be true. Stranger Things has always rewarded people who pay attention to details. The show plants seeds early and harvests them seasons later. Background details become crucial plot points. Throwaway lines foreshadow major reveals. The Duffer Brothers are meticulous about their storytelling, which means that even the most outlandish theories sometimes have merit. Let's start with one of the most persistent theories: time travel. The time travel theory has been around since Season 2, but it gained serious traction in Season 4 when we saw Mrs. Kelly, the Hawkins High Guidance Counsellor, wearing a very specific piece of jewellery, a necklace with a key-shaped pendant, and that key looks suspiciously like a clock key. Now this might seem like a stretch, it's just a necklace, right? Lots of people wear clock-related jewellery, but nothing in Stranger Things is accidental. And when you consider that Vecna's primary visual motif is a grandfather clock, that clock symbolism is tied to his curse. That time itself seems to behave strangely around the upside down. Suddenly that necklace becomes more interesting. The theory goes like this: Mrs. Kelly's necklace isn't just decorative. It's the key to Vecna's grandfather clock. And that clock isn't just a symbol of death. It's an actual mechanism for controlling time. In D&D lore, Vecna has multiple artifacts of power. The Eye of Vecna and the Hand of Vecna are the most famous, but there are others. What if the Stranger Things version of Vecna has created his own artifact, a clock that allows him to manipulate time within his mindscape and potentially in the real world as well? This would explain some oddities we've noticed throughout the series, like how the Upside Down is frozen on November 6, 1983. That's not a natural state for a dimension. It's a temporal lock. Something or someone stopped time in that place, on that specific date. What if Vecna did that? What if he's been manipulating time all along, creating loops or pauses or skips to give himself advantages in his conflicts with Eleven and the gang? There's also this really interesting detail about Mrs. Kelly herself. She's the guidance counsellor who talks to Chrissy, Fred, Patrick, and Max before they're targeted by Vecna. She's the last person to have normal, extended conversations with each of his victims. What if that's not coincidence? Now, I'm not saying Mrs. Kelly is evil or working for Vecna, but what if she's connected to the clock mechanism somehow? What if her presence around the victims serves a purpose in Vecna's curse? Some fans have theorized that Mrs. Kelly is actually a time traveler, that she's from the future, trying to prevent certain events by intervening with Vecna's victims. But her interventions fail, or maybe her interventions are what mark people for Vecna's attention in the first place. It's a bit Doctor Who, honestly. Time travel stories always get complicated, but the pieces are there if you look for them. There's also the question of how Vecna's curse works mechanically. When someone is cursed, they hear a grandfather clock chiming. They see the clock in their visions. Time seems to distort around them. Chrissy mentions time feeling weird, stretched out or compressed. Max experiences something similar. What if the clock isn't just a psychological symbol? What if Vecna is literally manipulating his victims' perception of time, trapping them in temporal loops of their worst memories until they break? That would make the Kate Bush running up that hill scene even more meaningful. Music brought Max back to the present, anchored her in real time, broke Vecna's temporal manipulation. I suppose the big question is, if time travel or time manipulation is possible in Stranger Things, what does that mean for the end game? Could the heroes go back and prevent the Upside Down from being created? Could they save Barb, Bob, Eddie, and all the other people who've died? Could they stop Vecna before he becomes Vecna? Maybe by saving young Henry Creel from whatever trauma turned him into a monster? That's the problem with time travel stories. Once you introduce the possibility of changing the past, you have to address why the characters don't use it to fix everything. And if they do use it, you risk undoing all the character growth and emotional arcs that made the story meaningful in the first place. The Duffer Brothers are smart storytellers. If they're going to use time travel, they'll do it carefully. Maybe it's limited, maybe it has consequences, maybe it only works in specific circumstances. Or maybe Mrs. Kelly's necklace is just a necklace, and we've all been reading too much into it. But I don't think so. I think the clock imagery is too persistent, too central to Vecna's identity, for it to be purely symbolic. There's something there, we just don't know what yet. Fun fact, in some of the behind-the-scenes interviews, the Duffer Brothers have mentioned that they had a 25-page document about the Upside Down's mythology that they wrote back in Season 1. That document contains information about what the Upside Down really is, that they've been slowly revealing across the series. And they've said that Season 5 will finally answer the big questions from that document. If time manipulation or temporal anomalies are part of the Upside Down's fundamental nature, that would be a pretty big reveal. It would recontextualize everything we've seen, make us rewatch the series looking for temporal clues we missed the first time. That's good television, honestly. Stories that reward rewatching and an analysis. Now let's talk about another theory that's been absolutely dominating fan discussions since Season 4, the Cass theory. Cass the Betrayer is a character from Dungeons & Dragons lore. He was Vecna's most trusted lieutenant, a vampire warrior who wielded a legendary sword. Cass served Vecna loyally for years, helping him conquer realms and achieve godhood. But eventually, Cass betrayed Vecna. In their final battle, Cass destroyed Vecna's physical form, reducing him to just his eye and hand. But Cass was also destroyed in the process, his soul trapped between life and death. The question Stranger Things fans have been asking since Eddie Munson's death is, will Eddie return as Cass? Eddie died in the Upside Down. He was swarmed by demobats, torn apart trying to buy time for his friends. His body was left there in that horrible dimension. We didn't see a funeral. We didn't see his body recovered. As far as we know, Eddie's corpse is still in the Upside Down, being absorbed by the vines and decay. What if Vecna found it? What if he resurrected Eddie as a vampire-like creature, corrupted and twisted, serving as Vecna's lieutenant? The parallels are there. Eddie was accused of murder, hunted by the town, misunderstood and feared. He could have run, could have saved himself, but he chose to fight. He chose to be a hero, and he died for it, with Dustin by his side, finally proving to himself that he wasn't a coward. If Vecna brought Eddie back as a corrupted version of himself, it would be the ultimate corruption of that sacrifice. Eddie's heroism turned into service to the villain. His death made meaningless. For Dustin, it would be devastating. He watched Eddie die. He promised Eddie's uncle that Eddie died a hero. If Eddie returns as a monster, Dustin would blame himself. And he'd have to fight his friend, possibly kill him again to stop him. The theory is really compelling from a dramatic standpoint. It gives Eddie's character more to do, justifies Joseph Quinn returning for season 5 in some capacity, and creates a personal antagonist for Dustin specifically. But there's a problem. Joseph Quinn isn't returning. The Duffer Brothers have stated this explicitly in interviews. When asked about the Keys theory, they said, "Joe is so busy anyway that everyone should know he's not coming back. He's shot like 5 movies since. When the hell has he got time to come and shoot Stranger Things? No, sadly, RIP, he's fully under that ground." That seems pretty definitive. Eddie is dead, buried, not coming back. But fans are stubborn. And honestly, so am I, because there are a few reasons to think the Duffers might be misdirecting. First, they've lied before. They denied major plot points in interviews, only for those plot points to happen exactly as fans predicted. They're protecting the story, which is their job. Second, the Cass theory has become so widespread, so analysed, that the Duffers would know denying it would create doubt. By explicitly shutting it down, they might be trying too hard to convince us. Reverse psychology. Third, Joseph Quinn doesn't need to return in person for Eddie to return as Cass. With makeup, prosthetics, potential CGI, and the fact that a corrupted vampire Eddie wouldn't look much like regular Eddie anyway, they could use a body double or voice actor. Quinn could record lines remotely or not be involved at all beyond licensing his likeness. I'm not saying I believe Eddie is definitely coming back. The Duffers' denial seemed genuine, but I'm saying the possibility isn't zero. And if it's not Eddie as Cass, could it be someone else? There's a theory that Billy Hargrove could return as a Cass-like figure. Billy also died in the Upside Down, or rather died while connected to the Mind Flayer. His body was recovered, but what if a fragment of his consciousness remained in the Upside Down, trapped in Vecna's hive mind? Billy as Cass would be interesting because of his connection to Max. Imagine Max finally escaping the mindscape, returning to her body only to face her dead stepbrother as a corrupted vampire servant of Vecna. That's some Greek tragedy-level drama right there. Or what about Steve? There's a wild theory that Steve might be infected or corrupted at some point in Season 5, turned into a Cass figure who has to fight against his friends before being saved or redeemed. This theory comes from some promotional images and trailer shots that show Steve looking particularly rough, with what might be bite marks or corruption spreading on his skin. Could be nothing. Could be a red herring. Could be Cass. The thing about the Cass theory is that it's based on D&D lore, and Stranger Things loves its D&D parallels. The show has used D&D monsters and concepts consistently. The Demogorgon, the Mind Flayer, Vecna himself. So introducing Kays wouldn't be out of left field. It would be narratively consistent. But maybe Cass isn't a resurrected character. Maybe Cass is someone we haven't met yet. Someone who appears in the final episodes as Vecna's new lieutenant, only to betray him at a crucial moment. That would be a twist, a character introduced specifically to fulfill the Cass role without requiring any existing character to die and return. I suppose we'll find out soon enough whether the Cass theory has any truth to it, or if it's just wishful thinking from fans who want their favourite characters back. Now let's talk about the Thessal Hydra. The Thessal Hydra is a D&D monster that was mentioned all the way back in the first episode of Stranger Things. When the boys are playing their campaign in Mike's basement, they face a Thessal Hydra. It's their final boss, a 7-headed dragon-like creature that's nearly impossible to defeat. In the show, they lose that campaign. Will's character is killed by the Thessal Hydra. Then Will vanishes in real life, taken by the Demogorgon. That parallel has always been significant. The show has used D&D campaigns to foreshadow real events. So when the Thessal Hydra appeared in that first campaign as the ultimate monster, fans started speculating that it would eventually appear in the real Stranger Things universe as a final boss. Season 4 seemed to dismiss this theory. Vecna was revealed as the big bad, the mastermind behind everything. He's humanoid, not a multi-headed dragon. He doesn't match the Thessal Hydra description at all. But then Season 4 gave us a specific detail that reignited the theory. Will's painting. Will is an artist. He's been drawing since Season 1, processing his trauma through art. In Season 4, when the Byers family moves to California, we see Will working on a painting. He keeps it hidden, wrapped up, secret. Eventually, he gives it to Mike as a gift. The painting shows the D&D party as heroes. Will the Wise, Mike the Paladin, Lucas the Ranger, Dustin the Bard, Eleven the Mage, Max the Zoomer, and in the centre, a dragon with 7 heads. The Thessal Hydra. Will painted the Thessal Hydra as the enemy. They're all fighting together. This could be purely symbolic, representing their unity against evil, or it could be foreshadowing that the Thessal Hydra is coming. Now, how would the Thessal Hydra fit into the established mythology? We already have Vecna, the Mind Flayer, Demogorgons, Demobats, and Demodogs. Where does a 7-headed dragon fit? Theory 1. The Thessal Hydra is Vecna's final form. What if Vecna, when fully powered, when he's absorbed enough energy from his victims and vessels, transforms into something even more monstrous? We've already seen him go from Henry Creel to Vecna. What if there's another transformation? What if the spider-like humanoid form we know is just a transitional state, and his true final form is the Thessal Hydra? 7 heads could represent the 7 sins, or the 7 chakras, or just be a symbol of complete power. Each head could have different abilities, making him exponentially more dangerous. Theory 2. The Thessal Hydra is what the Mind Flayer becomes. The Mind Flayer currently has a spider-like form with a flame-shaped head. But what if that's not its final form either? What if, when Vecna is defeated or weakened, the Mind Flayer breaks free from his control and transforms into its true form, a 7-headed dragon? This would create a scenario where the heroes think they've won by defeating Vecna, only to realize that the Mind Flayer is the actual threat, the real final boss hiding behind Vecna all along. Theory 3. The Thessal Hydra is all 7 of something. 7 gates, 7 victims, 7 vessels, 7 aspects of Vecna's power. What if the 7 heads represent different elements that need to be defeated separately? This would give each member of the core group a specific target. 7 heads? And conveniently, there are 7 main kids in the party when you include 11 and Max. Each person faces their own head, their own personal final boss, and only by defeating all 7 simultaneously can they win. It's very video game logic, but Stranger Things has always had video game elements. The way characters level up, learn new abilities, face progressively harder challenges. A 7-part final boss wouldn't be out of place. Theory 4. The Thessal Hydra is a red herring, and we're all overthinking this. Maybe Will just liked drawing dragons. Maybe the painting was symbolic and nothing more. Maybe the Thessal Hydra from the first episode was just establishing the D&D theme and has no further relevance. I really hope this isn't true. I want the Thessal Hydra to be real. I want that callback to episode 1, that fulfillment of the foreshadowing. It would be so satisfying narratively. But the Duffer Brothers could surprise us. They could introduce a completely different final boss that nobody's predicting. That would certainly be a twist. What's interesting is that episode 4 of season 5 is titled Sorcerer. That's a heavy D&D reference. And if the titles continue following D&D themes, which seems likely given the show's roots, then episode 6 or 7 or 8 might be titled Thessal Hydra or reference it directly. The titles so far are The Crawl, The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler, The Turnbow Trap, Sorcerer, Shock Jock, Escape from Camazotz, The Bridge, and The Right Side Up. None of those directly reference the Thessal Hydra, But the bridge could be metaphorical, a bridge between forms, between states of being. Vecna bridging into his final Thessalhydra form? Or the right side up could be the battle against the fully manifested Thessalhydra, with the heroes finally defeating it and restoring the world to its proper state. I'm speculating wildly here, but that's half the fun of these theories. Before looking into all this, I honestly thought the Thessalhydra was just a neat Season 1 reference that wouldn't come back. But the more I see the hints, the painting, the D&D themes throughout Season 5, the more I think it's building to something. Whether that something is a literal seven-headed dragon or a metaphorical representation of the final conflict, I don't know. But I'm excited to find out. Now let's talk about some of the other major theories floating around. These are less elaborated than the time travel, Cass and Thessalhydra theories, but they're still worth discussing. Theory: Hopper becomes chief of police again. This one is basically confirmed. Set photos from Season 5 show David Harbour in a Hawkins Police Department uniform wearing a chief's badge. Hopper hasn't been the chief since Season 3, when he was presumed dead after the Starcourt Mall explosion. If Hopper is reinstated as chief, it would represent a return to normalcy for his character, or as normal as things can get in Hawkins. It would also give him official authority to coordinate the defence of the town against Vecna's invasion. The symbolism is nice too. Hopper started the series as the town's protector, investigating supernatural threats and trying to keep people safe. He lost that role when he died, spent Season 4 as a prisoner and then a fugitive. Becoming chief again would be a full circle moment, reclaiming his identity and purpose. Plus, we know Hopper survives through at least part of Season 5 because we've seen him in the uniform in promotional materials. So that's one character we can probably assume makes it to near the end. Theory: Dr. Owens has a larger role in the endgame. Dr. Sam Owens, played by Paul Reiser, has been one of the few sympathetic government figures in the show. He's tried to help Eleven and the kids, even when it meant going against his superiors. He genuinely wants to do the right thing, which is rare in the Stranger Things universe, where most authority figures are either corrupt or incompetent. Owens has knowledge about Hawkins' lab, about Brenner's experiments, about the government's involvement with the Upside Down. He might have information that becomes crucial in the final battle. There's also speculation that Owens could sacrifice himself to help the kids, going down fighting against the corrupt elements in the government or creating a distraction that lets Eleven escape. I hope he survives, honestly. Paul Reiser is Paul Reiser, wonderful in the role, and Owens is one of the few adult characters who consistently makes good decisions. Theory: Murray Bauman is actually a former spy or special operative. Murray has always been more capable than he appears. He speaks fluent Russian, he's skilled in hand-to-hand combat, he figured out the Russian base under Starcourt when trained government agents missed it. His paranoia and conspiracy theories often turn out to be right. What if Murray's background is more extensive than we know? What if he used to work for the CIA or another intelligence agency, and his current identity as a freelance investigator is cover or retirement? This would explain his skills and knowledge. It would also make his friendship with Joyce and Hopper more meaningful. He's not just a weird, helpful guy. He's someone with experience fighting secret government projects and covering up supernatural threats. It's a fun theory, though I'm not sure we'll get confirmation. Murray works as a character regardless of his background, but it would be a nice reveal if they have time for it. Theory: the final battle involves breaching into Dimension X, not just the Upside Down. We've established that Dimension X and the Upside Down are different places. The Upside Down is the corrupted mirror of Hawkins. Dimension X is the primordial wasteland where Vecna first gained his full power. If the heroes really want to defeat Vecna permanently, they might need to go to Dimension X, to the source, to the place where he first connected with the Mind Flayer and became what he is now. That would be a trip into truly hostile territory. The Upside Down is dangerous, but it's familiar. Dimension X is completely alien. Unknown rules, unknown threats, unknown geography. It would be a proper final level for the series. The ultimate dangerous environment. The place where everything started going wrong. And if the cave that Vecna fears is a portal to Dimension X, that could be how the heroes access it. Through the one place Vecna can't control, into the dimension he thought was his private domain. Theory: the series ends with Hawkins destroyed or fundamentally changed. This is a dark theory. The idea is that saving the world requires sacrificing Hawkins. Maybe the town is too corrupted by the Upside Down to be saved. Maybe the only way to close the gates permanently is to destroy the nexus point where they keep opening. This would mean the survivors have to leave, have to find new homes, have to scatter. No more Hawkins, no more returning to the place where they grew up. It would be bittersweet. They save the world, but lose their home in the process. I don't love this theory, but I can see the Duffers doing it. The town has been ground zero for every supernatural disaster. Maybe it's time for it to end. Theory: some characters are moved to the epilogue without appearing in the climax. This is more of a storytelling prediction than a theory about plot. With so many characters and only 4 episodes left, the Duffers might skip some characters in the final battle and catch up with them in an epilogue. So we might not see, say, Murray and Erica's final scenes during the climax. Instead, we'd jump forward weeks or months in an epilogue and see where everyone ended up. Who survived, who's recovering, who's moved on. It's a practical solution to the problem of too many characters and not enough time. But it also means some fan favourites might get less screen time in the finale than we'd hope. Theory: the final episode is nearly 3 hours long. The Duffers have said the finale is film length. The season 4 finale was 2 hours and 19 minutes. It's entirely possible that season 5's finale is even longer, potentially approaching 3 hours. That's a lot of time to wrap things up, answer questions, and give characters proper endings. It's also a lot of time for things to go horribly wrong, and for our hearts to be ripped out repeatedly. I'm both excited and terrified about watching a 3-hour finale. That's a serious emotional commitment. I might need to take a day off work just to recover. There are dozens of other theories floating around. Some are elaborate and well-researched, others are just wild speculation based on single frames of trailers. But that's the fun of being part of a fandom. Everyone's trying to predict what happens next, piece together the clues, figure out the mystery before it's revealed. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're hilariously wrong. Either way, the theorizing is part of the experience. And honestly, even if all these theories turn out to be false, even if the Duffers surprise us with something completely different, I'll be impressed. The fact that they've created a world rich enough to support this much speculation is an achievement in itself. While we're on the topic of theories and speculation, we should probably talk about the one aspect of the show that generates more fan theories than anything else. The relationships, specifically the love triangle that's been simmering since season 1. Section word count 4,118, running total 24/718, 30,000 retry W, continue, assessed progress, and prepared relationship-focused script section. The user wants me to continue writing the script. Let me check my progress. Current word count 20,417 to 30,000. Next section according to outline. Section 8, relationship theories. Steve, Nancy, Jonathan and love triangle. Target for this section, 203 words, scaled from 650 to match 30,000 word total. After this section, cumulative target will be 22,620 words. I need to write about the love triangle, romantic subplots, character relationships. This section should be lighter in tone than the heavy theory sections, more focused on character dynamics and emotions. Let me make sure I'm following the style guide. Warm, enthusiastic voice. Personal reactions and opinions. British colloquialisms. Mix of paragraph lengths. I'm not going to lie. Honesty. What's wild interesting? Here's your observations. Self-aware about discussing shipping empathetic toward all characters, I also need to check that I'm not mechanically repeating patterns. Let me vary my openings and transitions. Running total verification. This section target, 203 words. Cumulative written so far, 20,417 words. Cumulative target after this section, 20,220 words. New total target, 30,000 words. I've gotten to this point in the video, and I'm just now realising I haven't mentioned one of the most talked about aspects of the show. Who ends up with who? The romantic subplots that have been brewing since the very beginning and are finally coming to a head in Season 5. Let's talk about the love triangle. Steve, Nancy, and Jonathan. This has been going on for literally the entire series. Nancy started dating Steve in Season 1. He was the popular guy, the jock. Kind of a jerk at first, but with a good heart underneath. Nancy was the smart, ambitious girl who wanted more than just high school romance and parties. Then Jonathan entered the picture. The quiet outsider. The photographer. Will's older brother. He and Nancy bonded while searching for their missing siblings. They had chemistry, shared trauma, a deeper connection, based on understanding rather than just attraction. Nancy broke up with Steve at the end of Season 1, got together with Jonathan in Season 2, and for a couple of seasons that seemed settled. Nancy and Jonathan were the couple. Steve moved on, became the beloved babysitter, found his purpose protecting the kids rather than pursuing romance. But Season 4 stirred everything back up. Steve and Nancy ended up working together again, investigating the Creel House murders, fighting Vecna in the Upside Down, and the old chemistry was still there. The way they looked at each other, the way Steve protected her, the way Nancy couldn't quite let go of what they'd had. Then Steve made his confession. In the Upside Down, while they were waiting to attack Vecna, Steve told Nancy about his dream for the future. He wanted an RV. He wanted to travel. He wanted 6 kids, maybe 7. He wanted Nancy by his side for all of it. It was vulnerable and sweet and completely earnest. Joe Keery's performance was brilliant. You could see how much Steve still loved Nancy, how he'd never really gotten over her. Nancy didn't respond. They were interrupted by the attack on Vecna, but you could see in Natalia Dyer's face that Nancy was affected, that she had feelings for Steve that she'd been suppressing. Meanwhile, Jonathan was in California, struggling with his own issues. He'd been smoking weed with Argyle, dealing with the stress of his family situation, feeling disconnected from Nancy. Their long-distance relationship was falling apart. By the end of Season 4, nothing was resolved. Nancy and Jonathan were technically still together, but the distance between them was more than just geographic. Steve was still pining for Nancy, and everyone could see the tension. Season 5 has made things even more complicated. In Volume 1, there's this moment in Episode 3 where Jonathan receives a gift from Murray Barman. It's an engagement ring. Murray, being Murray, just hands it over with some gruff advice about not being an idiot and actually committing to Nancy. Jonathan takes the ring. He's planning to propose. But he hasn't done it yet. He's waiting for the right moment, which is understandable given that they're in the middle of a supernatural crisis and Nancy's little sister has just been kidnapped by a Demogorgon. But there's this underlying anxiety in Jonathan's scenes. He knows Nancy's been spending time with Steve. He knows there's unresolved history there, and he's worried that waiting too long to propose means he's going to lose her. Charlie Heaton plays Jonathan's insecurity really well. You can see him second-guessing everything, trying to find the perfect moment but knowing there's no such thing. Meanwhile, Steve is still around, still looking at Nancy with those puppy dog eyes, still being heroic and selfless and everything Nancy could want in a partner. And Nancy is stuck in the middle, dealing with actual life or death situations while trying to figure out her romantic feelings. It's messy, it's complicated, and honestly, I don't know who she should choose. Let me break down the arguments for each relationship, because both have merit. The case for Steve and Nancy, they have history. They've both grown since their first relationship. Steve has become a genuinely good person, someone who puts others first, who's brave and loyal and caring. He's proven himself over and over. He's matured from the shallow popular kid into someone with real depth and substance. Nancy brings out the best in Steve. He's ambitious when he's with her, thinking about the future in concrete terms rather than just drifting. And Steve makes Nancy feel safe. He protects her, supports her, believes in her, even when she doubts herself. They also have incredible chemistry. The upside-down scenes in season 4 were electric. You could feel the tension, the unspoken feelings, the what if we tried again possibility hanging in the air. If Nancy chose Steve, it would be a romance story about second chances, about two people who weren't right for each other, the first time finding their way back after they've both become better versions of themselves. The case for Jonathan and Nancy, they understand each other on a deeper level. Both of them are outsiders in different ways. Both of them have had to be responsible, to take care of their families, to sacrifice their own wants for others' needs. Jonathan saw Nancy for who she really was from the beginning. He didn't fall for the perfect popular girl facade. He saw the ambitious, determined, complicated person underneath. And Nancy saw Jonathan's artistic soul, his sensitivity, his intelligence. They've been through so much together. Defeating the Demogorgon, exposing Hawkins' lab, fighting the Mind Flayer. Their relationship was forged in shared trauma and mutual respect. If Nancy chose Jonathan, it would be a story about partnership, about two people who work together, support each other's goals, and build a life based on understanding rather than just passion. Both options are valid. Both relationships have value. And that's what makes this triangle so frustrating and so compelling. I'm not going to lie, I've gone back and forth on who I think Nancy should end up with. Some days I'm Team Steve, appreciating his character growth and his genuine love for Nancy. Other days I'm Team Jonathan, valuing the deeper connection and shared history. What's wild is that the show has done such a good job developing both relationships that there's no clear right answer. It's not like one guy is obviously better for Nancy. They're both good men. They both love her. They both deserve happiness, which means someone's heart is getting broken, and it's going to hurt to watch. There's also a theory, a dark theory, that the love triangle will be resolved through death rather than choice. Specifically, there's a theory that Jonathan is going to die, possibly sacrificed to save Nancy, and that's how the triangle ends. Here's the logic. Jonathan has the engagement ring. He's planning to propose, but he's waiting for the right moment. In dramatic storytelling, when a character is planning something important and waiting for the perfect timing, they often don't get the chance. They die before they can execute their plan, creating maximum emotional devastation. The theory suggests that Jonathan will be targeted by Vecna. Maybe he's the next victim, or maybe he sacrifices himself to protect someone else. And Nancy, realizing too late that she should have appreciated what she had with Jonathan, tries to save him using music. This would parallel Max's escape from Vecna in season 4. Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill saved Max. What song would save Jonathan? Fans have speculated about The Cure, The Smiths, Joy Division, something from Jonathan's established music taste, something that represents his relationship with Nancy. Nancy would frantically search for the right song, trying to pull Jonathan out of Vecna's trance. And maybe she succeeds temporarily. Maybe Jonathan wakes up long enough to tell her he loves her. Maybe he even proposes with his dying breath. It's absolutely heartbreaking to think about, and it would certainly resolve the triangle. Nancy would be free to eventually move on with Steve, but Jonathan's death would always be this bittersweet memory, this what if that shapes her future relationships. Charlie Heaton is a fantastic actor. If they give him a tragic death scene, he'll absolutely nail it, and Natalia Dyer would break our hearts with Nancy's grief. But I really hope this doesn't happen. Jonathan deserves better. He's been through enough. His dad abandoned the family. His little brother was kidnapped and possessed. He's had to grow up too fast and take care of everyone around him. Let him be happy for once. There's an alternative theory that's equally dark. Steve sacrifices himself for Nancy. Steve's entire Season 4 arc was about him realizing he wants a future with Nancy. He's finally figured out what he wants from life, which in storytelling terms often means he's about to lose it. What if Steve dies protecting Nancy? What if he throws himself in front of a Demogorgon, or stays behind to hold off Vecna while Nancy escapes, or makes some other heroic sacrifice that proves his love, but costs him his life? It would be poetic. The popular kid who started the series as somewhat selfish and shallow, ending it with the ultimate selfless act, dying to save the girl he loves, even knowing she might not choose him. Nancy would be devastated, and she'd probably end up with Jonathan, but always wondering if she made the right choice, always mourning what she lost with Steve. This theory also has merit, but I hate it just as much as the Jonathan death theory. Steve has become one of the most beloved characters on the show. His friendship with Dustin, his evolution as a person, his babysitter role with the kids. Killing him would be devastating for the entire fandom. Joe Keery has said in interviews that he'd be okay with Steve dying if it served the story, which is ominous, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. I suppose there's a third option. Nobody dies, Nancy makes a choice, and everyone moves on. This is the mature adult solution. Nancy sits down with both Steve and Jonathan, explains her feelings honestly, chooses one of them, and they all work on accepting the situation and maintaining their friendships, despite the awkwardness. It's not as dramatic as a death, but it's realistic, and it would show growth. Not everything needs to be tragic sacrifice. Sometimes people just make choices and live with them. If Nancy chooses Steve, Jonathan would be hurt, but he'd eventually recover. He'd move back to California maybe, focus on his photography, build a life for himself that doesn't revolve around waiting for Nancy. If Nancy chooses Jonathan, Steve would be hurt, but he'd eventually recover. He'd find someone new, someone who wants the 6 kids and the RV adventure, someone who chooses him first. Both men are strong enough to survive rejection. It wouldn't destroy them, it would hurt, but they'd move on. Honestly, that's the ending I'm hoping for. Nobody dies. Nancy makes a choice. Everyone survives and eventually finds happiness, even if it's not with their first choice. To be fair, there's also an argument that Nancy doesn't need to choose either of them, that she focuses on her career, on her ambitions to be a journalist and expose corruption, and lets both relationships go. She's going to college, moving to a bigger city, pursuing her dreams. Maybe that means leaving both Steve and Jonathan behind. It would be the feminist ending, Nancy choosing herself rather than choosing between two. Men prioritizing her goals over romance. I'd respect that ending, but I also think the show has invested too much time in these relationships to just abandon them without resolution. The triangle needs an answer, even if that answer is neither of them. Now, beyond the central love triangle, there are other romantic subplots worth discussing. Mike and Eleven have been the core couple since Season 1. They're endgame. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They've been through too much together. Their relationship is too foundational to the show for them to break up now, but Season 5 is testing them. 11 is being hunted by the government. Mike is trying to protect her, while also dealing with the Vecna threat. They're both under immense stress, and stress can break even the strongest relationships. I think they'll survive. I think they'll end the series together, maybe with the implication that they'll get married someday. It's the one relationship in the show that feels truly stable. Lucas and Max are more complicated. Max is in a coma. Her consciousness is trapped. Lucas has been sitting by her bedside for a year, refusing to give up hope. If Max wakes up, if she comes back, their relationship will have to be rebuilt. Max will have changed. The trauma of being trapped in Vecna's mindscape will have affected her. Lucas will have changed too, dealing with a year of grief and guilt. But I think they love each other enough to make it work. Caleb McLaughlin and Sadie Sink have incredible chemistry. Their characters deserve a happy ending together. Hopper and Joyce are basically married at this point. They've been through hell together, literally and figuratively. Hopper was presumed dead for months. Joyce travelled to Russia to save him. They've earned their happy ending. I fully expect them to be together at the end of the series, probably with plans to officially tie the knot. It's the adult relationship that mirrors Mike and Eleven's young love. Both couples have proven their devotion through impossible circumstances. And then there's Will. Will's sexuality has been subtext for seasons, becoming more explicit in season 4. He's in love with Mike. He painted that picture for Mike as a confession, disguised as a D&D metaphor. He's been pining for his best friend while watching Mike be happy with Eleven. It's heartbreaking. And it's not going to have a happy resolution, at least not in the way Will wants. Mike is straight. He loves Eleven. He's not going to suddenly develop feelings for Will. That's not how sexuality works. So Will has to learn to move on, to accept that his first love is unrequited, to find happiness and identity beyond his feelings for Mike. Season 5 has been giving Will more focus, more development. His scenes with Robin, his discovery of his powers, his growing confidence. He's becoming more than just the boy who was taken or the kid in love with his straight best friend. By the end of the series, I hope Will is in a place where he's accepted himself fully, where he's out and comfortable with his identity, where he's moved past his feelings for Mike, and is open to finding love with someone who can love him back. That's the ending Will deserves. Not tragic martyrdom, not eternal pining, but genuine self-acceptance and hope for the future. Noah Schnapp has talked about how important Will's queer arc is to him personally. He wants to do right by queer viewers, especially young queer people who see themselves in Will. I trust that the Duffers will give Will a meaningful, respectful ending. I suppose what I'm saying is that the romantic relationships in Stranger Things matter. They're not just soap opera drama or filler between monster fights. They're part of what makes these characters feel real and relatable. We've watched these kids grow up over 5 seasons. We've seen their first crushes, their first relationships, their heartbreaks and reconciliations. We're invested in their happiness. So whoever ends up with who, however the triangles and complications resolve, I hope it feels earned. I hope it respects the characters and their journeys. I hope it gives them the endings they deserve, and I hope at least some of them get to be happy. After everything they've been through, they've earned some joy. But for now, let's talk about something a bit lighter, or at least something that doesn't involve quite so much emotional devastation. Let's talk about Easter eggs, callbacks, and all the incredibly clever ways the show references itself and 80s pop culture. Now, you can't talk about Stranger Things without diving into all the incredibly clever ways the show references itself, 80s pop culture, and honestly, just rewards people who pay attention to details. The Duffer Brothers are meticulous about this stuff. Nothing is accidental. Background posters, song choices, episode titles, visual parallels, they're all deliberate. And if you're the kind of person who likes picking apart stories and finding hidden meanings, Stranger Things is basically a treasure trove. Let's start with the most obvious callback in Season 5, the episode titles. Episode 1 is The Crawl, Episode 2 is The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler. If you're a fan of the show, that second title should immediately remind you of something. The very first episode of Stranger Things, back in Season 1, was titled The Vanishing of Will Byers. That's not coincidence. That's intentional parallel structure. Both episodes involve a young, innocent Wheeler family member being taken by forces from the Upside Down. Both involve the family and friends desperately searching for answers. Both set up the central conflict of their respective seasons. Will's vanishing started everything. It opened the gate, brought the gang together, established the threat of the Upside Down. His disappearance was the inciting incident for the entire series. Holly's vanishing in Season 5 is bringing things full circle. The show is returning to its roots, to that initial horror of a child being stolen from their bed, from their safe suburban home. by something incomprehensible. But there's also a key difference. When Will was taken, nobody knew what they were dealing with. The Upside Down was a mystery. The Demogorgon was unknown. The gang had to figure everything out from scratch. When Holly's taken, they know exactly what happened. They know about Vecna, about the mindscape, about the danger she's in. But that knowledge doesn't make them any more capable of saving her immediately. In some ways, it makes it worse. They know precisely how much danger she's in, and they feel helpless anyway. The parallel title draws attention to how much has changed and how much has stayed the same. The threat is still children being taken. The response is still desperate people refusing to give up. But the context, the knowledge, the emotional weight is completely different. I love that the Duffers did this. It's a simple callback, just matching episode titles, but it immediately tells fans, we're bringing this full circle, we're ending where we began. There are other title parallels too. The crawl references the opening of A New Hope, where text crawls up the screen, providing exposition. It's a Star Wars reference, which is very appropriate for a show set in the 80s and obsessed with sci-fi and fantasy. The Turnbow Trap in episode 3 is a reference to a specific D&D adventure or campaign element. I'm not deeply versed enough in D&D to know the exact reference, but fans who play have pointed out that it's a classic trap scenario where the party thinks they're in control, but they're actually walking into an ambush. That's exactly what happens in the episode. The gang thinks they have a plan. They think they're being proactive, but Vecna has anticipated them, and they end up in more danger than they started. Sorcerer obviously references Will's D&D class and his discovery of his powers. Shock jock is apparently a radio DJ term from the 80s, referring to controversial or provocative radio personalities. I'm curious how that ties into episode 5, which we haven't seen yet. Escape from Camazotz, we've already discussed. It's the A Wrinkle in Time reference, Holly's name for Vecna's mindscape. The bridge could mean a lot of things. A physical bridge between dimensions, a metaphorical bridge between past and present, a bridge in the narrative structure, connecting different storylines, and finally, the right side up, the perfect inverse of the upside down. It implies restoration, things being set right, the world returning to its proper state. It's the hopeful ending title, suggesting victory and closure. I'm absolutely obsessed with how much thought went into these 8 titles. You can map the entire season's arc just from reading them. Setup, inciting incident, complication, power discovery, escalation, rescue attempt, climax, resolution. It's proper clever storytelling. Now let's talk about some of the visual and thematic callbacks within the episodes themselves. Season 5 opens with a flashback to the night Will disappeared. We've seen this night before multiple times across different seasons, but each time we see it, we learn something new. We get a different perspective, a new piece of information that recontextualizes everything. In Season 1, the flashback was from the party's perspective. Will riding home, the lights flickering, the Demogorgon appearing. In Season 2, we got more details about what happened after Will was taken. His time in the Upside Down, Castle Byers, his survival tactics. Now in Season 5, we see the night from Vecna's perspective. We see the psychic connection he'd already established with Will, the intention behind the kidnapping, the long game he was playing. It's like peeling back layers of an onion. Each season reveals more about that crucial night, and each revelation changes how we understand the entire story. The Duffer Brothers have said in interviews that they had this mythology planned from the beginning. They knew why Will was taken, they knew about Vecna's involvement, they knew about the bigger picture, but they've been revealing it slowly, letting the audience discover the truth alongside the characters. That's really good long-form storytelling. Most shows don't have that level of planning. They make it up as they go, retconning things when needed. But Stranger Things has felt cohesive from day one, like every season is a chapter in a pre-written book. Fun fact, the Duffer Brothers have mentioned in multiple interviews that they always planned for the show to run 5 seasons. Not 4, not 6, 5. They had the structure mapped out before they even finished writing season 1. That's why the pacing has felt so deliberate. Season 1 was the introduction. Season 2 was the expansion, showing that the threat was bigger than one Demogorgon. Season 3 was the escalation, bringing the threat into the real world in a physical way. Season 4 was the revelation, explaining the mythology and introducing the mastermind. And Season 5 is the conclusion, bringing all the threads together and ending the story definitively. You can see that structure reflected in the visual language of the show too. Each season has its own colour palette, its own aesthetic identity, but they all connect. Season 1 was dark and mysterious, lots of shadows and muted colours. Season 2 was slightly warmer but still ominous, with the red skies of the Mind Flayer's presence. Season 3 was bright and colourful, the neon summer aesthetic of the 80s mall contrasting with the body horror underneath. Season 4 was gothic and atmospheric, the Creel house and Vexner's design pulling from classic horror imagery. Season 5 seems to be combining all those aesthetics. We've got the dark mystery of Season 1, the red skies from Season 2, the bright pops of colour from Season 3, and the gothic horror from Season 4. It's a visual synthesis of everything the show has been. Now let's talk about some specific references and Easter eggs that fans have spotted in Volume 1. Robin makes a Back to the Future reference in one of her conversations with Will. She says something about timelines and alternate realities, and the way she phrases it is a direct nod to Doc Brown's explanations in the film. This is notable because Back to the Future came out in 1985, which is right around the time Season 5 is set. The movie was a massive cultural phenomenon. Of course, the nerdy, pop culture-aware kids of Hawkins would reference it. But it's also potentially foreshadowing. Is Robin's comment just a casual reference, or is it hinting at actual time travel or alternate reality elements in the plot? With the Mrs. Kelly clock necklace theory and the temporal anomalies of the Upside Down, it could be more than just a throwaway line. There are also multiple Steven Spielberg references throughout the season. This makes sense because the Duffer Brothers have always cited Spielberg as a huge influence. E.T., Close Encounters, Jaws, Jurassic Park. Spielberg's fingerprints are all over Stranger Things. In Holly's room, there's a poster for An American Tail, the 1986 Spielberg-produced animated film about a Russian mouse immigrant in America. It's a movie about family, about being lost and finding your way home, about courage in the face of overwhelming odds, all themes that are super relevant to Stranger Things and to Holly's storyline specifically. She's lost, separated from her family, in a dangerous new world. She needs to find courage to survive and escape. The parallel is quite on the nose, but in a good way. There's also the way Eleven's storyline echoes E.T., the psychic child who wants to go home, who's being hunted by government agents, who finds family with the kids who help her. It's been there since Season 1, but Season 5 leans into it even more with Dr. K's pursuit of Eleven. The musical choices in Season 5 are also loaded with meaning. The trailers featured Deep Purple's Child in Time and Queen's Who Wants to Live Forever. Child in Time is a 10-minute epic rock song from 1970 about war, innocence, and apocalypse. The lyrics talk about sweet child in time, life being wasted, and time passing. It's thematically perfect for a season about children being used as weapons in an interdimensional war. Who Wants to Live Forever is from the Highlander soundtrack. It's about immortality, about watching everyone you love die while you persist. It's melancholic and beautiful. For a season where we're probably going to lose multiple beloved characters, it's an absolutely devastating song choice. Queen in particular has been important to Stranger Things. Remember Eddie's Season 4 comment about how, if you haven't heard Master of Puppets, you've been sleeping? The show treats music as crucial, as something that defines identity and saves lives. Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill saved Max in Season 4. What songs will save people in Season 5? What music will become iconic because of this show? The Duffer Brothers have a gift for music supervision. They pick songs that feel absolutely perfect for the moment, and then those songs become inseparable from the show in our minds. I can't hear "Should I Stay or Should I Go" without thinking of Will and the Upside Down. I can't hear "Running Up That Hill" without thinking of Max flying through the air trying to escape Vecna. Whatever songs feature prominently in Volume 2, and the finale will probably become similarly iconic. Now let's talk about the number 11, because the show is absolutely obsessed with this number, and there are Easter eggs related to it everywhere. Obviously, 11 is called 11, her number, her identity, but the number appears constantly throughout the series in ways that are too consistent to be accidental. Will went missing on November 6, 1983. That's 11/6 in American date format. The gate was opened at Hawkins' lab on that same date. The Upside Down is frozen at that exact moment. 11 was born on, we don't know the exact date actually, but her designation as 11 is what matters. She's the 11th child in Brenner's experiments. The address numbers in Hawkins often add up to 11 or contain 11. The Byers house, the Wheeler house, various locations around town. There are 11 members in the main cast if you count everyone who regularly appears. Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Will, 11, Max, Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, Robin, and Erica. Exactly 11. Season 1 had 8 episodes. Season 2 had 9. Season 3 had 8. Season 4 had 9. That's 8 plus 9 plus 8 plus 9 makes 34. If you add 3 plus 4, you get 7. Season 5 has 8 episodes. 7 plus 8 makes 15. 1 plus 5 makes 6. Okay, that one doesn't work out to 11, but I'm sure there's some numerology explanation fans have come up with. Actually, you know what? Let me not go too far down the numerology rabbit hole. Some patterns are meaningful, some are coincidence, and some are fans seeing connections that aren't actually there. But the number 11 is definitely intentional. It's 11's identity, it's woven into the fabric of Hawkins, it's part of the show's visual and thematic DNA. There are also recurring visual motifs that appear across seasons. The Christmas lights that Joyce uses to communicate with Will in Season 1 come back in different forms throughout the series. Lights flickering, lights being used as warnings, lights representing the boundary between dimensions. The compass that went haywire in Season 1, pointing toward the gate, is referenced again in later seasons when characters need to detect upside-down presence. The Demogorgon's petaled face has been echoed in other creature designs. Vecna's mouth when he's feeding, the Mind Flayer's tentacles. There's a visual continuity to how the Upside Down's monsters look. Castle Byers, Will's fort, has been a recurring symbol. It appeared in Season 1 as his childhood refuge. In Season 2, it was shown in both the real world and the Upside Down. In Season 3, Will destroyed it himself in a moment of frustrated grief, symbolising the end of his childhood. I don't think we've seen Castle Byers in Season 5 yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes back in some form. It's too important to Will's character to be completely abandoned. The show also loves its parallels between characters. Will and 11 have always been mirrors of each other. Both were victimised by the Upside Down. Both have connections to Vecna. Both have powers. Both are trying to reclaim their humanity from forces that want to use them as weapons. Mike and Nancy parallel each other too. Both are the leaders of their respective groups. Both are determined and stubborn. Both have romantic complications with multiple partners. Lucas and Erica are the sibling pair, who've both become more confident and capable over the series. Lucas started as the skeptical one, the voice of reason. Now he's a fighter. Erica started as an annoying little sister. Now she's a certified hero in her own right. Steve and Jonathan are interesting parallels because they started as rivals for Nancy's affection, but have become allies. They've learned to respect each other, even if there's still that underlying tension. And Hopper and Joyce mirror each other's parenting styles. Hopper is protective to the point of overprotectiveness with 11. Joyce is fiercely devoted to Will, sometimes smothering him with concern. Both of them are dealing with trauma from losing children in the past, and both of them are desperate not to lose again. Before looking into all this, I honestly didn't realise how much structural repetition there was across the seasons. But once you start noticing, you see it everywhere. Every season has a sequence where characters get separated into different groups, working on different aspects of the problem. The season 1 finale had Joyce and Hopper in the Upside Down, while the kids faced the Demogorgon. Season 2 had the group split between closing the gate and exorcising Will. Season 3 had the Mall group and the Russia group. Season 4 had the California crew, the Hawkins crew, and the Russia crew all working simultaneously. Season 5 is doing the same thing. We've got Eleven and Hopper infiltrating the military base, Mike and Lucas and the others defending against creatures, Max and Holly trapped in the mindscape, Joyce and Murray doing something, multiple storylines, multiple locations, all building toward a convergent climax. It's a formula, but it's a formula that works. It creates tension by splitting up the people we care about. It allows for multiple types of action and drama to happen simultaneously, and it gives every character something important to do. Every season also has a moment of heroic sacrifice. Bob in Season 2, Billy in Season 3, Eddie in Season 4. Who's the sacrifice in Season 5? That's the question everyone's dreading. Every season has a reunion scene between Eleven and Mike. The kiss in Season 1. The snowball in Season 2. The mall in Season 3. The desert in Season 4. Presumably, there'll be one in Season 5, though given how scattered everyone is, it might not happen until the very end. Every season ends with the kids together, looking toward an uncertain future. The Season 1 ending showed them playing D&D again, but with the implication that things weren't fully resolved. Season 2 ended with the snowball and the mind flayer looming. Season 3 ended with the buyers moving away. Season 4 ended with Hawkins being torn apart. Season 5's ending is going to be different because it's the final ending. There's no next season, no to be continued. Whatever happens in episode 8, that's it. That's how the story ends. I really hope it's a happy ending, or at least a hopeful one. These kids have been through hell. They deserve peace. There's also this running theme throughout the series of adults not understanding or believing what the kids are going through. In Season 1, nobody believed the kids about the Upside Down until it was undeniable. In Season 2, Dr. Owens tried to cover everything up. In Season 3, the adults were mostly oblivious until the finale. In Season 4, the town blamed Eddie for Vecna's murders. Season 5 is finally showing adults taking the threat seriously from the beginning. Hopper knows what they're facing. Joyce knows. Murray knows. Dr. Owens knows. Even some of the military personnel understand that this is a supernatural threat, not just teenage hysteria or Russian conspiracy. It's a sign of how much the stakes have escalated. The threat is too big to hide anymore, too obvious to deny. Hawkins is literally tearing itself apart. The Upside Down is visible. There's no covering this up, no pretending everything is normal. The kids have always been the ones who had to save the world, while adults either helped reluctantly or got in the way. But in Season 5 it's becoming more of a unified effort. Everyone who knows about the Upside Down is working together, regardless of age. That's actually quite beautiful. It took 5 seasons, but finally the adults are listening to the kids. Finally, the generational divide is bridged by shared understanding of the threat they all face. I love how the show has slowly built to this point. It mirrors how the kids have grown up. They started as children who adults didn't take seriously. Now they're young adults whose experience and knowledge is respected and necessary. It's a metaphor for growing up, for earning your place in the world, for being taken seriously by the generation above you. Okay, I think I've rambled enough about Easter eggs and callbacks. There are probably hundreds more that I've missed, little details that eagle-eyed fans have spotted in the background of scenes or hidden in dialogue. That's the beauty of Stranger Things. You can watch it casually and enjoy the story, or you can watch it obsessively pausing every frame to look for hidden meaning and find layers of depth that reward your attention. It's a show that respects its audience's intelligence while still being accessible and entertaining. That's a hard balance to strike, and the Duffers do it beautifully. Since we're talking about details and mysteries, let's discuss something that's been absolutely fascinating fans since Volume 1, the cave that terrifies Vecna and what it might mean for the final battle. Let's talk about one of the most intriguing mysteries introduced in Season 5. The cave that Max hides in, which apparently terrifies Vecna. Why would an all-powerful dark wizard be afraid of a hole in the ground? This cave isn't new to the Stranger Things mythology. It's been referenced before, particularly in the first Shadow play that premiered on Broadway and the West End. The play is officially canon, written with the Duffer Brothers' involvement, and it provides crucial backstory for young Henry Creel in the 1950s. In the play, there's a cave system near Hawkins where something significant happened to Henry as a child. He encountered something there, something connected to Dimension X or the Mind Flayer or whatever cosmic horror was waiting in that dark space. The experience traumatized him and set him on the path to becoming Vecna. The Duffer Brothers confirmed in their recent Variety interview that the cave in Season 5 is the exact same cave from the first Shadow play. This isn't coincidence or similar locations. It's the same physical place, and it's deeply important to understanding Vecna's origin and his ultimate defeat. So what happened in that cave? Based on what we know from various sources, young Henry Creel was playing in the cave system when he found a piece of equipment, stolen equipment from the Philadelphia experiment, hidden there by someone trying to keep it away from the government. Henry activated it accidentally and was transported to Dimension X for the first time. That first encounter with the otherworldly dimension changed him. He gained his psychic abilities. He was exposed to the Mind Flayer's influence. He became something other than fully human, but the experience also left him with a deep psychological scar. The cave represents the moment his life changed irrevocably. The place where innocent Henry became Monster Henry. The threshold he crossed that he can never uncross. In Season 5, Volume 1, we see that the cave exists in both the physical world of Hawkins and in Vecna's mindscape. It's one of the few locations that bridges both realities naturally, without needing gates or psychic projection. Max has been hiding there for over a year while trapped in the mindscape. She discovered that Vecna can't fully enter the cave, can't control what happens inside it. It's a blind spot in his omniscience, a place where his influence weakens. Why? Theory 1. The cave predates Vecna's corruption of the mindscape. When Vecna shaped the Mind Flayer and created his psychic domain, he was working with the raw material of Dimension X, but the cave had already existed as a natural connection point between dimensions. It's older than Vecna's power, and therefore outside his ability to reshape or control. It's like how in fantasy stories, certain ancient places resist magic because they have their own inherent power. The cave might be a nexus point, a thin spot in reality where the barriers between worlds are naturally weak. Vecna can't control it because he didn't create it. Theory 2. The cave is where the Mind Flayer first touched reality. What if the cave isn't just a passive portal? What if it's the original breach point, the place where Dimension X and the human world first made contact? If the Mind Flayer's consciousness first entered our reality through that cave in the 1950s during the Philadelphia experiment, then the cave might be the source of all the dimensional instability around Hawkins. Vecna fears it because going into the cave means confronting the Mind Flayer at its point of origin. If Vecna's control over the Mind Flayer isn't as absolute as he thinks, if there's any possibility that the Mind Flayer has its own agency, then entering the cave could sever Vecna's connection to his primary source of power. Theory 3. The cave represents Vecna's humanity. This is more psychological. The cave is where Henry's childhood ended, where innocence was lost, where the trauma began. Vecna has built his entire identity around rejecting humanity, around becoming a monster, around embracing his predator nature. The cave forces him to confront the scared little boy he used to be. It's a reminder of vulnerability, of the moment when he was powerless and terrified. For someone whose whole philosophy is based on being the apex predator, that memory is unbearable. If Vecna enters the cave, he might have to face the parts of himself he spent decades suppressing. The guilt, the fear, the human emotions he claims to have transcended. That psychological confrontation could weaken him or make him vulnerable in ways that physical attacks can't. Theory 4. The cave can trap him permanently. What if entering the cave severs Vecna's connection to the hive mind? What if it's a dimensional dead zone where psychic powers don't work properly? If Vecna goes into the cave, he might become cut off from his demogorgons, his demobats, his victims in the mindscape, even the mind flayer itself. He'd be isolated, vulnerable, just a burned, disfigured man without his army or his psychic projection. That would make the cave the perfect place for a final confrontation. Lure Vecna there, force him inside, trap him in a space where he can't access his usual advantages. Then the heroes could defeat him on more equal terms. The question is how to lure him. Vecna's not stupid. He knows the cave is dangerous to him. He's avoided it for decades. Why would he willingly enter? The answer might be Max and Holly and the other children. If they're in the cave, if they're using it as their escape route from his mindscape, Vecna might be forced to follow them. His plan requires those children as vessels. He can't let them slip away. So even though he fears the cave, he might risk entering it to recapture his prisoners. That's when the heroes strike. 11 and Will on the psychic plane, Steve and Nancy and the others in the physical world, all converging on the cave at the same moment. Vecna trapped between dimensions, vulnerable, finally within reach. It's a solid strategy, and based on how the Duffers have been setting things up, with Max leaving maps to guide Holly to the cave, with the repeated emphasis on Vecna's fear of that location, with the first shadow play establishing its importance, I think this is where the final battle happens. Not in the Creel house, not in the Upside Down, but in the cave, the place where it all began for Henry Creel, and the place where it all ends for Vecna. What's interesting is how the cave ties into the broader geography of Hawkins and the question of why this specific town is the nexus for all the supernatural chaos. Hawkins, Indiana isn't a real place. The Duffers created it specifically for the show, but they've given it this deep mythology, this sense that the town itself is significant beyond just being the setting. Why does Hawkins keep being the target? Why do gates open there specifically? Some fans have theorized about ley lines, about Hawkins sitting on some kind of mystical convergence point where the barriers between dimensions are naturally thin. That would explain why the government chose to build Hawkins Lab there in the first place. They weren't just picking a random location for their experiments. They knew there was something special about the area. The cave supports this theory. If it's a natural portal between dimensions, if it's been there for centuries or millennia, then Hawkins grew up around a dimensional weak spot. The town's entire existence might be because early settlers were drawn to the area by the subtle influence of Dimension X bleeding through. That's a bit cosmic horror, honestly. The idea that Hawkins was always doomed, that the town's fate was sealed long before anyone knew about the Upside Down or Vecna, that every person who lives there is living on top of a dimensional breach, just waiting to tear open. It would also explain why closing the gates hasn't permanently solved the problem. You can close a gate that 11 opened through psychic contact, but you can't close the cave. It's a natural feature, not an artificial breach. It's been connecting dimensions since before humans existed, and it'll continue connecting them long after humans are gone. If that's true, then defeating Vecna isn't enough. The heroes would also need to find a way to seal the cave, or stabilize it, or somehow neutralize its function as a portal. Otherwise, something else will eventually come through. Maybe not immediately, maybe not for decades, but eventually. That's a sobering thought. Even if they win, even if they defeat Vecna and close all the gates and save everyone, Hawkins itself might still be fundamentally compromised. The people who live there might always be at risk of dimensional incursion. Maybe that's why the ending involves leaving Hawkins, not because the town is destroyed, but because it's too dangerous to stay. The survivors scatter, rebuilding their lives elsewhere, leaving the cursed town behind. I don't love that ending, but it would make sense thematically. You can't go home again. Some places are too full of trauma and danger to return to. Sometimes, the only way to heal is to leave and start fresh somewhere else. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We don't know yet how the cave situation resolves, or what role Hawkins' geography plays in the finale. These are all theories, speculation, based on hints and patterns. What we do know is that the cave is important. Max is using it, Vecna fears it, the Duffers have confirmed its connection to the first Shadow play. It's going to be a major element in the remaining episodes. I'm really curious to see how they visualize it. In the Mindscape, we've seen it as this dark, rocky space, ominous, but not obviously supernatural. Will it look different when characters interact with it in the physical world? Will there be visual cues that it's a portal or dimensional nexus? And what about the creatures of the Upside Down? Can Demogorgons enter the cave? Can the Mind Flayer's vines reach into it? If it's truly outside of Vecna's control, it should also be outside the influence of his servants. That would make it the perfect safe zone, a place where the heroes can regroup, plan, recover without being attacked, which is probably exactly what Max has been doing for the past year, surviving in the one place where Vecna's monsters can't reach her. Proper clever of her, honestly. Sadie Sink's Max has always been resourceful, always finding ways to use the environment to her advantage. Hiding in the dimensional blind spot while the predator circles outside is peak Max strategy. Holly, learning from her, using the cave as sanctuary and escape route, continues that tradition. The Wheeler family might not have psychic powers or combat skills, but they're smart and adaptable. Nancy proved that. Now, Holly's proving it too. I suppose what I'm saying is that the cave represents hope. It's the place where Vecna's power weakens, where the children can be safe, where the final battle might be won. In a season that's been so dark and brutal, having a literal safe haven is important symbolically and practically. The cave is where light can exist in the darkness, where humanity can persist despite the horror, where the impossible victory becomes possible. That's beautiful storytelling, honestly, using geography and location to represent theme and emotion. The Duffers have always been good at that, but the cave might be their best example yet. Now, before we wrap up, let's talk about what we're expecting from Volumes 2 and 3, the final 4 episodes, the end of Stranger Things. The conclusion we've been building toward for 9 years, so we've covered a lot of ground tonight. But let's talk about what's actually coming next. 4 episodes remain, then it's over. After 9 years, Stranger Things ends on New Year's Eve 2025, and honestly, I'm not ready. Volume 2 drops on Christmas Day, with episodes 5, 6 and 7. Then the finale, episode 8, arrives on New Year's Eve. That's the Duffers' gift to us for the holidays, emotional devastation wrapped in supernatural horror. Based on the episode titles and what we know from Volume 1, here's what I think we're going to see. Episode 5, Shock Jock, is a bit of a mystery title. The term refers to provocative radio DJs from the 80s who pushed boundaries and said controversial things. How does that tie into the Stranger Things narrative? One theory is that it involves communication. Maybe someone manages to broadcast a message, either through radio or psychically, that shocks the system. Could be Eleven reaching out to all the psychic children simultaneously. Could be Will tapping into the hive mind and sending a disruptive signal. Could be something with the military's communication systems. Or maybe it's more literal. Maybe there's a character who gets electrocuted or shocked in some significant way. The Mind Flayer and Upside Down creatures are vulnerable to electricity and fire. We've seen that pattern before. Maybe episode 5 involves using electrical weapons or technology to fight back. I'm honestly not confident about this one. Shock Jock is the title I understand least, but I trust the Duffers have something clever planned. Episode 6, Escape from Camazots, we've already discussed extensively. This is the Max and Holly escape attempt. The episode where the children trapped in Vecna's mindscape make their move, using the cave as their route to freedom. I think this episode is going to be absolutely intense. We'll see Max's full year of captivity, what she's endured, how she's survived. We'll see Holly's courage as she helps coordinate the escape. We'll probably see other children, some who make it out and some who don't. And we'll see Vecna's response. He's not going to let his vessels escape without a fight. He'll pursue them into the cave despite his fear. That's when things get really dangerous, when Vecna is cornered and desperate. This episode could easily be the emotional peak of Volume 2, the moment when we find out definitively whether Max survives or sacrifices herself, whether Holly makes it home to her family, whether the other children can be saved or if some are too far gone. Sean Levy is directing episode 6, and he's talked about how spectacular and heartbreaking it is. That's high praise from someone who's directed multiple Stranger Things episodes and knows what the show is capable of. I'm going to need tissues for this one. Probably an entire box. Episode 7, The Bridge, feels like it should be the setup for the finale. The bridge between the rescue mission and the final confrontation. The moment when all the separated storylines converge and everyone prepares for the last battle. We might see Eleven and Will combining their powers for the first time, Hopper and Joyce reuniting with their kids, the full party assembling after being scattered across multiple locations, strategic planning, gathering resources, saying potential goodbyes. The bridge could also reference the dimensional bridge between the Upside Down and Hawkins. Maybe this is the episode where Vecna makes his final push to merge the dimensions completely. The heroes have to prevent that, while also dealing with the ongoing rescue operation and the creatures attacking the town. This episode probably ends on a massive cliffhanger, something that makes us desperate to watch the finale immediately. A character death, a shocking betrayal, a revelation that changes everything. The Duffers love their cliffhangers, and this one needs to be big enough to sustain anticipation for the series finale. Then we have Episode 8, The Right Side Up, the finale, the end of everything. Sean Levy has said that the finale gave him goosebumps, that nothing prepared him for what the Duffers achieved. The cast has talked about how emotional the final days of filming were, how they couldn't get through certain scenes without crying. This is going to be massive, probably close to 3 hours long, maybe longer. Every storyline resolved, every character's arc completed, the ultimate battle between the forces of humanity and the Upside Down. The Right Side Up as a title suggests restoration, things being set right, the world returning to its proper state after being inverted and corrupted by the Upside Down. It's hopeful, which makes me think the ending might be more optimistic than some of the darker theories predict. But hopeful doesn't mean painless. We're definitely losing characters. The question is who and how many. My predictions for who doesn't make it. I think we lose at least 2 major characters, possibly 3 or 4 if the Duffers are feeling particularly brutal. Murray seems like a likely candidate for heroic sacrifice. Dr. Owens might go down protecting the kids. One of the older teens, Steve, Nancy or Jonathan, could die in the final battle. I really hope all the kids survive. Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Will, Eleven, Max, Erica, Holly. They've been the heart of the show from the beginning. Killing any of them would be absolutely devastating. But I'm not naive enough to think they're all safe. Will especially worries me. His arc has been building towards something big. He's discovered his powers. He's accepted his identity. He's become crucial to the fight against Vecna. That feels like setup for a sacrifice play. Will choosing to give his life, to close the Upside Down permanently, to protect his friends and family, to finally be the hero instead of the victim. It would destroy Joyce. It would break Mike and the party. but it would be thematically powerful. The boy whose disappearance started everything, whose story we've followed for 5 seasons, ending his arc with the ultimate act of courage. I don't want this to happen, but I can see it happening. 11 is another character whose fate is uncertain. She's been the protagonist since day one. The show is fundamentally her story, but that also makes her a prime candidate for tragic sacrifice. The most impactful deaths are always the characters who feel essential, whose loss leaves a permanent hole in the narrative. If 11 dies closing the Upside Down, saving everyone, but unable to save herself, that would be heartbreaking and meaningful. Her life has been defined by being used as a weapon, choosing to sacrifice herself on her own terms for people she loves would be reclaiming her agency in the most final way possible. But again, I hope this doesn't happen. I want 11 to survive, to live a normal life, to be Jane Hopper, the regular teenager, instead of 11 the psychic weapon. What I think is more likely is that characters survive, but are changed. Max wakes up but is blind, or has memory loss. Will survives, but loses his powers. 11 survives, but her abilities are gone permanently. They get to live, but they bear permanent scars from the war they fought. That feels more realistic than everyone coming out unscathed. Trauma has consequences. Fighting interdimensional monsters for years has consequences. Some damage can't be healed, only adapted to. As for how Vecna is defeated, I think it'll be a combination of approaches. Physical attack in the real world, psychic attack in the mindscape, severing his connection to the Mind Flayer, and probably some elements we haven't predicted yet. The cave will definitely be involved. That's been set up too deliberately to not be crucial. And I think the final blow comes from either 11 and Will working together, or from a character we least expect making a game-changing sacrifice. There's also the question of what happens to the Upside Down itself. Does it collapse when Vecna dies? Does it seal permanently? Does it remain but become dormant? Can you even destroy a dimension, or can you only close access to it? The Duffers have said they'll answer what the Upside Down really is. That answer will probably come in the finale, and depending on what that answer is, it'll determine whether the threat is permanently resolved or just contained for now. I'm really curious about the final shot of the series. How does Stranger Things end, visually and emotionally? Do we get an epilogue showing the characters, years later, living their adult lives, having moved past the trauma? Do we see them still in Hawkins, or scattered across the country? Do we see their kids, suggesting that life goes on and the cycle continues? Or does it end right after the battle? The survivors together, wounded but alive, looking at a Hawkins that's finally safe? No. Flash forward, just the immediate aftermath and the promise of peace. Or does it end with ambiguity, the threat apparently defeated, but a final shot suggesting that something still lurks in the darkness? A gate that wasn't fully closed, a creature that survived, a hint that the Upside Down isn't completely gone. I'm hoping for the epilogue. I want to see these characters happy and healing. They've earned that. We've earned that after investing 9 years in their stories. But I also trust the Duffers to stick the landing however they choose to do it. They've been planning this ending since season 1. They know what story they're telling and how it needs to conclude. There's also the matter of the spin-offs. The Duffers have confirmed 2. First is an animated series called Stranger Things, Tales from 85, coming in 2026. It'll explore stories from 1985 that weren't shown in the main series. Side characters, different perspectives, maybe some of the Hawkins residents we never got to know well. It's a way to expand the universe without continuing the main storyline. Second is a mysterious live-action spin-off that the Duffers are developing but haven't revealed details about. They've said it won't feature 11, Mike, or Will. It won't be about the main party. It's something different set in the Stranger Things universe. Speculation about this second spin-off is rampant. Is it about other numbered children from Hawkins' lab? Is it set in a different time period? Is it about other towns experiencing their own upside-down encounters? Is it about the government's broader involvement with dimensional research? The Duffers have been very secretive about it, which suggests it's something surprising, something that'll recontextualize elements of the main series or explore corners of the mythology we haven't seen yet. I'm cautiously optimistic about the spin-offs. On one hand, I don't want Stranger Things to become a franchise that overstays its welcome, milking nostalgia until it's meaningless. On the other hand, the world is rich enough to support additional stories if they're done well. The key is that the main story needs to end properly. No cliffhangers, no sequel hooks, no dangling threads designed to force continuation. Season 5 has to provide complete closure for the characters we love. The spin-offs can explore other aspects of the universe, but they shouldn't be required viewing to understand how the main story ends. What's wild is that when Season 1 premiered in 2016, nobody could have predicted how big Stranger Things would become. It was a small Netflix show with unknown child actors, a throwback to 80s Spielberg films, a gamble on whether audiences still cared about that aesthetic. And it became a cultural phenomenon, the show that defined Netflix's identity, the series that made household names out of its young cast, the story that brought Dungeons and Dragons back into mainstream consciousness and made Kate Bush relevant to Gen Z. Stranger Things reminded people why they loved science fiction and horror in the first place. It captured something essential about childhood friendship, about the terror and wonder of growing up, about the monsters we face, both supernatural and personal. That's why the ending matters so much. This isn't just concluding a TV show, it's completing a cultural touchstone, a generational story that millions of people have invested in emotionally. The pressure on the Duffers must be immense. How do you end something this big in a way that satisfies everyone? You can't, obviously. Some people will love the ending, some will hate it. That's inevitable. But I think they can nail the emotional truth of it. They can honour the characters and their journeys. They can provide catharsis and closure. They can remind us why we fell in love with this story in the first place. That's all I'm really asking for. An ending that feels true to Stranger Things, that respects what came before, that gives the characters and the audience the conclusion we've been waiting for. 4 more episodes, less than a month until we see how it all ends. The anticipation is killing me, but it's also kind of beautiful. This collective experience of waiting, theorizing, hoping together. This shared journey we've been on since 2016. Whatever happens in the finale, we'll always have the journey. The summers spent binging new seasons. The discussions with friends about theories and favourite moments. The characters who became like family. The way Stranger Things made us feel like kids again, capable of wonder and terror and believing in the impossible. That's the real magic of the show. Not the telekinesis or the monsters or the dimensional horror, but the way it reminded us what it feels like to believe in something, to care about people facing impossible odds, to hope that love and friendship can defeat even the darkest evil. I'm not ready for it to end, but I'm ready to see how it ends. And I'm grateful we got this story at all, and that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's video. In a future one, I'm definitely going to cover Volume 2 reactions, finale theories, character deep dives, creature lore, the mythology of Dimension X versus the Upside Down, the full breakdown of the final battle. So much stuff that I didn't have the time to write for this video. There's plenty more to explore once we've seen how everything resolves. But until next time, stay safe and sweet dreams.